Yeah.
Waiting for
At
tab
all.
staff.
Cause the thing is as big as my screen. It's huge.
The big iPads here, they are big.
Yeah, cause he's got visual impairment, so they went with the iPad Pro.
Yeah. I mean, there are mounts that can mount on the tray and raise it up. I've seen where it's,
So Donna,
like
what
two
happens
big
if it freezes
fans
up?
with
Turn it off and turn it back on?
Still waiting for a few more people. We'll get started in a
Just
few.
What if it's next to my position
Oh, what time are you guys here till?
with flexibility? So,
Yeah,
and
he
there
has
are,
only
so,
one reason.
his left hand, but right eye. So there are mounts to that. So how many windows
Do I
So
put, I have our own cell, right?
Or if you want.
That's probably
Right.
let me just see.
The reason it froze
Most
last
of
time
them,
is because they had
so
still
there's some like the daisy mount that's
So
certain
kind of-
Okay.
Perfect, thank you so
much.
much.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like you bring an umbrella, it doesn't rain.
Christy got out of it?
That's not how it works.
Yes, it works that way, trust us.
How are you? I can join you.
Look at diapers and kids can pull over. Anytime you have a bag loaded with diapers, nobody moves that day.
It's very true.
Nicole, so whoever uses these, they can just put it back
Yeah.
here.
Okay.
So, you know,
Yeah,
not need to
yeah,
put it
that's
in.
good.
Yeah, the safety officer.
So I was so mad at her.
I didn't tell her.
I'm reading a little, she's very cool. She's like, oh. I'm like, well, I'm not
Plays
going
opposite.
to you, that's
Yeah.
for sure.
No, and everyone else like, I didn't get shamed, but we can say that, right? We can say we did it.
Since I saw you last.
I have
I haven't started
multiple
CTA.
children on my caseload that have
I haven't done my PSY amendments. You know, I'm just kind of coasting. That's life. And I just do amendments. Yeah. A couple of our.
My go-to shoe.
Hey, how are you?
Stitch fits.
Oh, you're doing that.
Let me send you my code when I get it.
Put in the minutes.
I love it.
I don't like shopping.
I don't either.
I love trying on stuff on my own.
Yeah, and then having somebody send me your
Yeah, definitely. It's cool. It was a little expensive at first, but now they've got bigger, the inventory is better,
Still in
so
here.
I just put
No,
say
and
what's
it's
the
either-
cheapest, it's
Yeah.
really not too bad.
I don't think it's
Yeah,
nice.
I love that, yeah, definitely love it, yeah.
So it's like, yes, exactly. Remind me, I'll say, thanks. Like, remind me.
Yes, I'm sorry about the rating apps, yeah.
Well, that, and then the.
Oh.
When it was on the 20th.
I'm in trouble.
Yeah, I think there's like some
It's
hybrid.
gotta be user-based.
Space.
It's gotta be each email. Each iPad that has it has to be a separate
You
user.
just lay down the line.
Even for the kids, well, it doesn't seem like that.
So
Like the
you
teacher
can,
can have it for a classroom.
yes, so you can have it on one iPad and be using it.
Exactly what I was thinking. The same thing.
Yes, then that's fine.
Whatever.
But if you have multiple users across multiple iPads, each iPad needs one user. Unless like, so there's me, right, but I'm not an educational institution, but if I were to buy it and I have 6 devices, I'm a single user, so I can put it on my devices, but I'm the only one using them.
I know I'm supposed to buy a license, but I'm not.
Right. I guess I just, I wasn't hard, I'm clear on that with Pro Info, and I wasn't clear on the board maker online.
No,
I'm clear about Pro Info.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Online is different.
Yeah.
Right, so that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, and it's a free app, so.
The app is free.
Right, because you log your kids in.
Right, so I'm just saying, so I'm talking about
We don't do that, do we?
Not legally. So you just don't know.
right, or like, what I was thinking is if I gave it to one class, like two classroom teachers have it, and I'm
Like, you know what I
working with
mean?
kids, if I'm in the classroom, if I could log in, and use it that way.
That's what I'm hoping.
You just, I got it approved, I didn't get as many.
Yeah, cause a professional, you can have as many kids as you want. Sure.
Right, that's what I thought, okay, I was like.
I apologize, I thought it was pro bono.
No, I'm talking
And it's just, you know, matter of.
And that's a big difference between professional and personal. Because professional, you can have all your kids allowed in.
Right, so I thought.
That's a lot. So the district has not used their.
I'm trying to figure out how to. And it's not my decision, but it's kind of, and maybe, you know, like here, it's needs it, but I'm trying to figure that out.
Right. And what I would do, I don't want to use them all at once, either you could ask who wants it, you could do some training to show people what it does, cause people probably don't know what it does.
I know.
And you can just do your thing here.
Oh, no, yeah, what I'm saying is, I don't know that I would just deploy them all out instantly, I would ask who wants it, and maybe do some little info sessions, but you don't have a huge amount of time, or send people a webinar, or something,
I
so they see what it does.
I did that. I sent them links to webinars and I sent them a free, how to sign up for a 3-month trial. So I emailed that to people, but I don't, my guess is that most people don't. Some people are already done it. So that's, so we got people like,
All right, welcome. We're gonna get started here. Hi, everyone. I know it doesn't look like a huge amount of people. There are people streaming online. I don't know if we're waiting for people. It's hard to kind of tell at this point. But welcome. I'm Nicole Natali. I'd love to hear, I recognize some faces, but not everybody. So I'm a speech-language pathologist here at CREC, an assistive technology practitioner. And this is Carol Ann.
Carol Ann Corner, same speech-language pathologist, assistive technology specialist here. We still have about half the people that have signed up that aren't here, so more than likely we're gonna have people that are.
Are you sure they're not live streaming?
So some of the districts were supposed to be here.
Okay. All right. Well, we'll have Ms. Wilson, so we'll have to get going. For those of you live streaming, and I'm sorry guys, we're talking to that stick there. So if you don't want to be on the camera at all, don't worry, we don't do anything with this except send it sometimes to our consortium people who missed it. Just don't walk in front of this thing. But don't worry, you're not gonna find yourself on social media or anything like that from there. But if you are live streaming and you can't do the YouTube chat, you can always text my phone. Next year we're getting a better way to live stream and a better way to have you all responding from home. So thank you all for coming. So this is the 4th of the CREC AT Consortium workshops. I recognize a bunch of USLPs from the last one we had, which was speech and language related as well. And all of these topics, I don't know if you all were involved, but we sent out a survey twice at the end of last year and the beginning of this year about topics that you all want, and this was one of them. Next year, our first workshop is most likely going to be, we're going to get all the AT and AAC vendors into this room. And also all of our lending library equipment will be here for demonstration, and it's going to be an assistive technology vendor fair just here for our CREC AT Consortium people. We're still working on gathering all of them here for that day. But we also really want your feedback about additional topics that you'd love to see us cover for next year as well. We will send a formal survey. You could always text me, YouTube chat us, and then if you're here, just put some of those topics in the parking lot there throughout the day, or we'll take a break halfway. If there are topics you really want us to cover, please let us know. It's always good. We always try to get all of your feedback. It's all about you and building capacity, our consortium, so please let us know. And also, equipment. We have a lending library as well.
And, we're always looking, we still have some money that we need to spend by June 30th. We are gonna invest in iPads, upgraded iPads and apps, cause we have to continually do that as the old ones die, and become totally, they become paperweights eventually. But we're always looking for additional equipment suggestions as well, including access to the iPad. We've been trying to really figure out what are the best switch interfaces for those individuals who need access via switch to the iPad.
So we do have like a couple of mounts and switches. Any switch choice you guys are thinking about? We have some, low mid-tech devices. We don't really purchase the high-tech devices just because one of them would do our budget for the year.
For 2 years, some.
Yeah, some of them for 2 years.
Yeah.
But particular apps that you're looking for, I mean, really, we have thousands of apps that we've purchased. Programs, things like that.
Yep. We've purchased speakers. I mean, the beautiful thing here at CREC is if we want something, we can order it on Amazon and it could be here in 2 days. We're in a school district. It could literally take 10 months to get something. So even if you want something for your student and you've put in the order, let us know. If we don't have it in the library, you can borrow it in the short term until that device comes in. So please utilize the lending library, and just also know you can travel to CREC to pick things up and drop off, or when Carol Ann and I are out and about in your districts, we're happy to bring them. I've met people, Pavini Shea in the parking lot of Laban's, depending on where we live, we're happy, to meet you guys places too, to get these devices and equipment in your hands so you could try them with kids. Any questions or thoughts on that? Just off the top of your head?
No. And for the lending library, it says 1 month, but if we don't have anybody waiting for it,
Yeah.
you can have it longer.
You can have an extension, yeah. And the paperwork to fill it out is relatively easy for the most part. So, thank you for all that. So, today is all about AAC, but moving beyond requesting. This was a topic that has been brought up a few times over the past few years. And, it's something that we really wanted to try to give you all resources for, because it is hard. When I think about some of the students I've worked with, some of the most successful students I've worked with using AAC, what made them successful? It was because they could generate a wide amount of utterances, right, independently, and they weren't just requesters. They were the commenters. They were the ones who learned strategies to be able to communicate effectively. And Carol Ann, could you talk about your adults that
for a lot of my individuals I've worked with, they may not have AAC, because for years I worked at DDS part-time, until adults. So a lot of times I would start, you always start with what's motivating, what's fun. And to me, that's the key, because especially if somebody hasn't been using AAC and they've been using other strategies that are successful, I'm not saying appropriate, but they're successful, they may have difficulty kind of transitioning over to AAC. So what can I give them with AAC that's motivating and fun and allows them to a higher level of success? So, for some individuals that may be FaceTiming with grandma or grandpa, that they can't do without it. So really sitting down with the team and saying, what does this child love? And planning based on what that child loves that they're not able to do right now. So one of the ladies I worked with, and I knew her for years, you may have heard this example before, and I apologize, but she would always say on her proloquo, sister, 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 and like 1,000 times in a day. And I happened to know, because I knew this young lady, that she loved her sister. Her sister lived in Florida. She was a semi-pro golfer. This young lady went to visit her multiple times over the year. So just from having known that child, I knew that. So when I went in and we're sitting on the couch chatting with our feet up, she was doing sister, sister, sister. My proloquo was open. I went to, people, family, and on the family page they had a picture of her sister, not a picture, her sister with her name. And when I touched that, it opened onto a page that talked about golf, mini golf in the water place in Florida, all these different things, and her face just lit up. And we ended up having a conversation about her sister. So she wasn't stimming on that message, she was trying to communicate how much she loved it. So, you know, I went out to a place and he kept on pressing trolls, 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 which is about the movie, which I have not seen, so I didn't know much about it. But I did know about Poppy and a few others, and we sat there together and programmed in messages about the Trolls movie. And he was using my device. Once that was in, he pushed his device away, and for 45 minutes, we ended up talking about trolls. So it has to be driven by motivation, it has to be driven by fun. The ASHA leader, if you guys get it, the May issue, had an article about using Alexa in here.
Mm-hmm.
Again, motivation. At home, if you control the TV, you have the power. So things like that. So I think you really have to analyze your student and what they love, because that's what we like to talk about.
Keep going, Carolyn, I have.
Oh, okay. So today's agenda, so we talked about the lending library. We're gonna be talking about communication. We have some materials that we'd like you to look at, so we're gonna break up into groups. So it's a communication matrix. We have some training materials, looking at your communication partners. I did bring these ASHA leaders, speech people in here. Okay, so you can pull out the old ones, but the April and May issue had some good articles in there. So in the April issue, there was one encouraging students to use AAC by supporting communication partners. So that includes resources that we're gonna look at today. We're gonna break up into groups, and we do have some Google Docs in the PowerPoint for you to add information to. And based on that information and the sharing, then we're gonna plan for intervention for your students. So hopefully there's enough members here that you're with somebody who's also part of your team, that you can kind of plan together for that intervention. Is that the one that I just mentioned?
It is.
Oh, look at her. Okay, so those are links to the ASHA leader articles.
Well, no, the top one
The
is
fun
not,
is,
so don't
right.
click that one yet, cause we wanted to do an activity here.
Yeah.
So the one that says fun exclamation point is an online link to the ASHA leader one.
Right, focus on fun.
But what we wanted to do now is just give you guys 2 minutes, talk in your tables and come up with a list or just some thoughts about why the heck we communicate in general. And I know it sounds basic, but we're gonna tie it all together. So give yourselves 2 minutes, talk about why we communicate. And then we'll share out.
Did you share this already on the Google Drive with us? I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah,
If
so-
you were registered, you should have gotten, if you were registered, you should have gotten an email, about, I don't know, 20, 30 minutes ago. But if not, here is the bit.ly.
Okay, so
bit.ly/AAC requesting. That's the link to the PowerPoint. So 2 minutes, go ahead, why do we communicate? We should hear some chatter. During AT consortiums, we communicate. I'm just, we all got confused because I sent the PowerPoint. I said, no, I gotta send. I'm gonna send Laura the YouTube link, and I think we should be.
social. Yeah.
Just a bit of itself. Oh, so the password for the Wi-Fi? Press one. So just go to your website.
Which website?
But he doesn't go anywhere, and he
Show,
doesn't-
show me one.
Yep, and just
Yeah,
take
that's
it.
Okay, take the notes. Okay.
Yep.
Yeah. And so it's here?
Yep.
Perfect.
Alright, one more minute.
That's nice.
Yeah,
That's fun.
Opinion. Yes, I took it with me, like I do all the things. I
No.
do the trail.
Okay, and live stream people, feel free to text me and, or chat as well. So why do we communicate? And I'm not here on, Instagram, I'm, in case people don't have, the thing is we use YouTube and not every district does the YouTube chat. So that some people are texting instead of. Next year will be better. Okay, so why do we communicate?
Social
For social what?
interaction.
Social interaction. What else?
To form relationships,
To form relationships, okay. What else?
wants and needs, expressing things.
Mm-hmm. Requesting for wants and needs. What else?
Sharing feelings.
Mm-hmm.
What was that last one?
Sharing feelings.
Give or get information.
What was that?
To give or get
To
information.
give or get information.
Expressing opinions.
Expressing opinions. Mm-hmm. What else? Anything else? Okay. So, what we're gonna do is, so we put this, a link to this article, and I hope it, works. We're not gonna have you read the entire article. This is Practical AAC, which, has anybody seen this website? Yeah, a few of you have. It's don't click on it unless you have like 7 hours worth of time, because it's like I just find myself going for one thing and then a total rabbit hole, and then I feel bad as a speech therapist and lazy. It's like it's a whole thing. It's like it's unbelievable what's on there. But regardless, Janice Light, a number of years ago, 1989 now. Actually, this was her thesis as a doctoral student. Wrote an article about what it means to be a competent communicator for individuals who use AAC. But what she basically did was look at how we communicate as humans and what are the main reasons why we communicate, and then how do AAC users, how do we get them to be able to communicate those main reasons. And believe it or not, does anybody know how many reasons there are that we communicate about? There's really only a few.
3.
Close. No. There's only 4. There's only 4 main reasons. So we can put all the things we communicate about into 4 main buckets. And so we're going to talk about them now. And the reason I love this article and going back to it, I don't know about you, Carol Ann, but when I'm really thinking about my students and I'm writing their goals and objectives, I write them around communicative competence because we want our kiddos to be competent communicators. That's our goal. Now, of course, we're not going to get them to be competent communicators in a year, which would be awesome if we could, but we want to be thinking about those 4 main reasons when we're writing goals and objectives, because those are the reasons that they're going to be able to communicate for that are going to make them competent. So what do you think one is? And we can look at this. Any common ones here? Social. Right. So there are 2 reasons we communicate socially, according to, what the 4 main reasons are. One is for social etiquette. So what is social etiquette? Saying hi. What else?
Thank you.
Please, thank you. Excuse me. It's also there's also some, argument about the fact, just the things we do just to be humans. Like, no offense, I'll ask you how you're doing. I don't really care. I mean, I do, Michelle, but you know what I mean? Like, it's just kind of one of those things we do to be a human, right? But it's just part of our social code. Saying, hi to the cashier, commenting on the weather. These are just ways that one reason that we communicate about. The other social one, what can you think of if we just broke down etiquette? What do you think the other social reason is? And you guys have it here.
Is that social contact?
Yeah. So, social interaction, relationships, sharing feelings could be wants and needs too. It's called social closeness. So, why we communicate, and one main reason is for social closeness, to initiate social relationships and continue and maintain them. So, what are some examples of social closeness vocabulary or interactions? Like saying I like.
Yeah.
So commenting, I like that. What else? Asking, partner-focused questions, right? Questions about your communication partner. What else? What'd you say? Absolutely. Yep. Did you have a oh. What else? Humor, for sure. Yep. If it's potty humor, my son likes you. That's I love you, right? Tickle me, hug me, sometimes bids for affection can all be considered social closeness, right? Let's see, connecting with others. Oh good, I was looking at, thank you, I just saw some of the live stream, there's social closeness. Okay. Laura Baxter wanted the website, it's right here. Okay, so we're missing two, here it is, Laura. Hopefully you can see it, bit.ly/AAC, capital AAC requesting. So there are two more main reasons we communicate. Yep.
Wants and needs.
Wants and needs, right.
Requesting.
So give me some examples of wants and needs.
Pain.
What, saying you're in pain? Mm-hmm. That's food, right? Give me my food. Hunger, thirst. What else?
Help.
Bathroom, help, needing help. Yep, requesting toys, requesting particular items, right? Obviously those are important. Now, and I would say, we're saying moving beyond the request. What we were really talking about is requests for sometimes tangible items. What Sue mentioned, the pain, where it hurts, that's hard for some of our kids. And it's almost always, I don't know about you, but the parents I work with, one of their top priorities.
That's right.
Besides the social closeness piece, which we can talk about. So even though we are saying moving beyond, we're really just moving beyond the getting a tangible item. So wants and needs is not always super easy. It is for the tangible things, but there's a lot that go into them too. And then there's one more main bucket of main reason why we communicate.
Information.
Yeah, information transfer. So give me some examples of information transfer.
Directions.
Give me directions. Mm-hmm.
Answering a question.
Answering questions.
Give a narrative about what you've done.
Providing information, sure. Mm-hmm. Talking about the weather, right? The really important things, biographical information. My name is, I'm 7 years old, I live in, my mom is, my emergency contact. So all communication can be broken down into those 4 main reasons. So now that you know that, and we didn't do a huge introduction, but I'm assuming you're all working with at least one kiddo that uses some kind of AAC or needs some kind of AAC. Talk together, what of these 4 main reasons are they really good at? And what do they need help with? So go ahead, 2 minutes, and then we'll.
We all have really
Yep.
Right.
I had a friend before, and he ran that one time, and seriously, she really close friends, I was like, I rubbed her shoulder, and took her hand, she knew where it hurt, and it's not really tell me where it is, it's like, tell me what it is, you can tell me where, it's like, so I started telling all my friends, for like, nonverbal, and then she really falls in her, and you see them hit like, their arms, and such, getting kind of like, a good number of us that lost, point to the right direction, so you know, like, they're not telling you, like, I hit my knee, but they at least point like the right spots, but it's something, it's something, they're not telling me, like, what they're telling me is like dumb or dull or hard, and they're not motivated by it, and you know when they're gonna love it, you know what I mean, it's all about balance. Unless it's right.
There's a lot of ways you don't even realize how much. Even verbal things. Remember, don't say how are you to me. Yeah. It might just be the age though, like, you know what I mean?
They were talking about this chair yesterday, and like he was laughing, and like he had a great time, even though you were laughing, he like was right on with it, but like he can't tell you.
And now I'm hearing people make comments in front of him, and he doesn't understand it, and he laughs. That's one of the areas that I'm starting someone got touched, like by a teacher doesn't do the right thing. He like was over here doing something, he literally like turned and but now that they know it, and they know this becomes so.
And it's hard to turn, like he's trying to.
He's trying to get that socially. Yeah, socially. Right, so like sometimes it's old and then they always I don't know what happens with that. But there's words that they're using and I'm like, whoa. He's not really, but it was just like, it was so fun, because it was so slight, but, and then she laughed, so I just thought she was really good, and I started to get not what I'm looking for.
Most of my kids are something now, but they're still looking at like being we want, would you want to
No, right.
and I have kids that
It's so funny.
And then
it's just like you ignore and you just gesture and do it.
and they look at it, and they just back in the head, they come
Well, that's what it was.
I've learned that you can't use excuses as non-preferred items.
So I just go on to the talk and that's it. Yeah. Keep doing it. boy.
I don't know. What is that?
So it's like,
It's
what
a
is
noun. And so everything on the keyboard he did, he couldn't answer. He was a vocabulary test. He said, I don't know what is that? And then he was looking at me like, it was very funny. I was like, so seeing that guy always was a part of the
All right, so let's hear it.
I'll check your
Okay,
Okay.
so some of the things you discussed. We start here.
I don't know, I've been focusing, I realized, you know, I've got all these kids requesting and so I've been really trying to focus on asking questions.
Uh-huh.
And, it's working out,
Oh.
So I either I take something that's highly preferred
Uh-huh.
and I hide it someplace in the room, and it starts out very structured, and then they have to, I tell them to go get it, and then they flounder around for a little bit, and then I work on them asking me the question. But so I was telling her, so we've worked on what questions in a similar fashion, not with hiding. But, so I had to do some standardized testing with a little boy recently, and so it was, an expressive vocabulary test using his talk or whatever. And so when he didn't know what something was, he figured out he could start asking me the question. He would say, I don't know, what is that?
Wow.
And then I was like,
That's pretty amazing.
But it was fun to see
Yeah.
him kind of generalize to a
Mhm.
new situation. You know, we hadn't done,
Uh-huh.
it was the first time I tested him in like 3 years, so it was fun to see that.
Wow. Yeah. Anything else, Michelle?
Well, I'm using it this year with a student who is not on the autism spectrum, but is very, very apraxic.
Mm-hmm.
And it's been cool for me to see because she's very, very social, just wasn't able to verbalize.
Right, yeah.
So we brought her talker to the cafeteria the other day, and she spontaneously went to verbs and found drink, and then went to coffee, and brought it up to her teacher and asked her teacher if she drank coffee,
Oh,
which I thought was cool.
Cute.
yeah. Good example. I would say yes. I drink coffee. How about over here? I've been hearing you guys talking.
Yeah, it's hard? Is that what we're talking about? I thought social closeness was a little hard,
Mm-hmm.
and making them wanna have that connection, or making it motivating enough, because sometimes it's not super motivating,
Mm-hmm.
so, cause it's not tangible sometimes.
Okay. Right, it depends on the student, yeah.
Yeah, some want
So
that.
they'll
Right.
want to,
Yep.
the other ones are more activity based, so
Okay.
having you help them access something or
Mhm.
good items.
Yep. Right, so it's gonna be individualized, obviously, based on what motivates the student. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
We talked about the social etiquette piece too, in terms of what's most important to teach when,
Uh-huh. Okay.
and just differences in who, how each will think.
Mm-hmm. Right, some of my kids are really motivated by the social etiquette, cause it gives them attention. Other kids, they'll just plow right through you, so. How about over here?
I spoke about a student that had a hard time expressing pain, where the pain was, and then until she was able to, type it in, realized, but it got to the point where her mom's like, where is the pain? And she really couldn't do it, and then, being able to use her talker, she was able to write down where the pain is, which is a huge thing when a student, she's an older student, so that is a life skill. But she couldn't express it to any practitioners, doctors, nurses, and so that was a huge stepping stone for her to be able to express that. She would show pain on her face.
Yeah.
But, he said, is it here, is it here, is it here? And then you said so.
Oh, so one of my birth of 3 kids, he fell one day and like mom, he wasn't like seriously hurt.
Oh, okay.
But he fell one day and like mom's like, I didn't see him fall, he just came over crying. So she's like, I rubbed his shoulder and he took my hand and put it on his knee. So he was able to tell her at least
Good, yep.
where it was. So then I told all my other families, like, try this if they're not hurt. Like, see if you can just touch the wrong part and see what they'll do. So, I mean, he at least, he's talking now, but like before he had no way to tell you what it was. But now he at least can do that. So, it's something.
And pain is probably the hardest thing, where it hurts, because it's like you have to be in that context. And when our kids are in that context, their communication skills aren't as good to begin with. I mean, none of us are when we're in pain. And there are times it's like, as an adult, I'm not even sure. So, and yes, that's something that parents desperately want, and it's something that can be really hard with our students, so. Anything else?
Well, I guess I'm just thinking like, I wasn't even thinking down that line, but sadness too. It's like I had a student this morning I was working with who was so sad.
Yeah.
He's normally a very happy kid, and we were all like, is he sick? Did something happen this morning? Did he not sleep well? Like, you know, and he just couldn't, he had no way of telling us. I mean, he has a talker and he's learning how to use it, but it was, you know, we were kind of jumping through those hoops trying to figure out, because there were so many answers that it could have been.
We've been finding with that too, like one of our kids, he's verbal, very much on the autism spectrum, but if you ask, like he can be crying and like he's learned like, how are you? I'm good.
Right.
Yeah.
I'm happy. So
no, and he
even
said
just,
happy.
Yeah.
He
So
said
even
he
just like
happy.
he can identify it in other people. So if you show him a
Yeah.
picture of someone crying, he's sad. He knows that he's sad, but it's like we had him for lunch one day and he started crying. He finally figured out he thought we were taking him away from recess. We're not.
Yeah.
He was going to recess right after, but he was crying and couldn't stop crying. Like we had a visual schedule, we had all these things. Like we got to like kind of delve into his emotions a little bit, and like he was finally able to tell us like, I'm sad. Couldn't tell us why. We figured it out.
So
But
conditioned response.
yeah, but that's that's what I think. It's like the pain thing is hard too, because that's what so many of the kids like. You learn to say I'm good or I'm happy, right? Even if you're very visibly not.
Right. Yep.
We had a preschool student too, who was kind of similar. Like you could tell something was off, and you were trying to ask her and get visuals out to help her explain it. And then, so it was like all day she couldn't tell us. Then she got like one of our communication boards and touched tummy or stomach.
Wow.
And then threw up.
Well, she was accurate.
Right. Yes. So yes, we called it out and we're like, she threw up, but
the good thing
big
is,
victory.
It was in bad news.
Yeah. But then she kind of got stuck on that too, like,
okay.
she saw a response of that. So then the next time she's at school, she's touching
Tummy
tummy and stomach. Yeah.
So, one of the times I took my niece out when she was young, she kept on saying she had a headache, and I was like, you know, all right, honey, we'll get home and we'll lie down. And then she proceeded to like throw up all over my car. And when I called my sister-in-law, she's like, oh, I forgot to tell you. When Cole says she has a headache, it means she has a stomach ache. So, yes.
I did want to share, I put on here, thanks Caroline, this interaction needs assessment. Assessment is a very loose word, it's not really an assessment. It's something I've used in the past. I don't use it as much anymore with the communication matrix, etc. But I've sent this home to families too, because it breaks down, and I'm sorry it's not super formatted super well, because I just transferred it from Microsoft Word. I'll try to fix it for you. I just put it up to Google Docs. But it really gets at the 4 main reasons we communicate and all the different contexts in which our kids communicate. And sometimes we don't see them, well, we oftentimes don't see them at home or in the community. And so we want to be preparing for all the contexts with which our kids communicate. So this has been a real eye-opener for me, because it asks family or teams or para-educators how effective they think their students are in those particular interactions. And then also it asks them to prioritize. And really, we're supposed to, when we write our goals and objectives, right, and writing and meeting at PPTs, get parent feedback. This is a nice way to get it, because for me, I might really want my kiddo to be able to tell me when he's in pain, but the parents might really want them to be polite. And I'm not saying one is right or wrong, but it's good to have conversations around it all and to really know where people are coming from and what families' priorities are, because sometimes they are different than ours, and we have to be sensitive to that, because this is communication, and it doesn't just happen, you know, in the 2 half hours a week we see them as speech therapists or doing our intervention, but it happens, obviously the whole point is to make our kids competent communicators, not just in school but outside. So I think it's still a decent tool. It's really old. I think it was Janice's from a long time ago, but yeah, so I think it was based off her doctoral work. It's adapted, but again, it just gives you some good, you could take it, adapt it, just, you know, keep her credit on there, even though she wouldn't care at this point. It's not, I don't think it was anything that was even officially published, but it's good. It's a good questionnaire to have, and to know what your family's priorities are, and also the other people in the kids' lives that aren't just you, the paras, that type of thing, because they see them in different contexts too, and they might, you know, say, hey, you know what, he really can't ask a question in class. Those types of things. Sometimes you'll get some additional information.
So I think from that types of needs questionnaire, and then I usually send out an informational questionnaire that talks about where the child goes, who he goes with, you know, what they like to do together, people in their lives. So, like the high school student I talked about, I mean, her sister was important, but what was really important was talking about all the things they did together. So I'll get that up on Google Docs, and we'll post a link in the handout. But when you open up a child's communication application, you should see the child reflected in it, because it's their voice. So I should be able to go through it and know so much about that child. Just as if I was using Proloquo, when you opened it up, it would talk a lot about crafts and knitting and weaving and sewing, because that's what I do in my leisure time. So you should all know a lot about it, because I mean, I can't communicate with the child if they don't have that vocabulary to communicate about what's important to them, so.
Yeah, I wanted to say that this list kind of, it also can be used for students that don't use AAC, like our students that are on the spectrum that don't have good communication skills, know how to do it but just don't do it, but also to get more input from the parents. As I'm looking at this, I was like, oh, I could ask that question, I could ask that question, so it could probably be modified to be sent home before PPT for many types of students that get speech and language services. That it would be helpful to have that at PPT for that parent input.
I think you make a really good point, because she based the 4 reasons we communicate not based on AAC users, because unfortunately they're not competent communicators, right? So she based it on what everybody communicates about, and then we'll obviously want to get there. So that's a really good point too. It's obviously pretty simplified, but when you think about communication, you could put almost pretty much everything into those 4 buckets. Now we're going to make it a little confusing, unfortunately, because the matrix, and we're going to look at the matrix, doesn't completely organize communication that way. But we'll talk about that when we get to it. So, and Laura said in Ridgefield, she thought information transfer is the hardest because it often requires complex steps to find all the vocabulary. So, and I think she's also talking about Proloquo, how Proloquo is initially set up. You kind of have to go through a few pages, but that's what Carol Ann said, you know, customizing some of those important priorities, making it so there's a button on the main page or the secondary page that's very quick to be able to get to for some of those really important pieces of vocabulary. That's really where you have to customize. Proloquo was really, especially the initial ones, it was just 2 dudes in a basement saying, this is a good idea, let's put this vocabulary. They didn't do a huge amount of research, and it's gotten a lot better for sure over time, but it's certainly not perfect, so.
But it was the reason why I bought my first iPhone.
Yeah.
Because it was the first transient screen app that was under like $7,000 or $10,000 for our students. So, yeah.
For sure.
They came out, I went to the iPhone store.
So we wanted to talk about core vocabulary. We've kind of beaten this to death in other consortium workshops, so we're not going to spend a huge amount of time on it. But the reason we wanted to make sure you all had just, some knowledge about core vocabulary and just to go over it again, is that you can't communicate this wide range or these 4 reasons without core vocabulary. It just doesn't exist. Can someone, just for anybody here, can someone define what core vocabulary is for the people that haven't heard maybe about it before? So if you can give us the elevator speech of what core vocabulary is. Anyone? Go ahead.
It's like the most frequently used words that make up the language.
Yeah, that's exactly what it is. So 80% of what we say is core vocabulary. 75 to 80%. The other 20, I'm not good with math. 25 to 20% is fringe, right? And so you cannot communicate a wide variety of different ways to communicate or reasons without core vocabulary. So this link, the first one, is again the practical AAC rabbit hole. If you could scroll down, Carol Ann. It is she's put together a bunch of AAC vocabulary links.
Not all of them work.
Not all of them work. Yeah, this could be old. Okay, unfortunately not. Yeah, the UN, does the UNL one work for children? Is it young adults?
Yes.
There was 2 that did.
Well, some of them work, some of them don't.
Yeah.
Okay.
It doesn't really.
Darn it. And some of them you might be able to find it. It's probably on a different link from that website. That was University of Nebraska. Yeah, there you go. Maybe you just have to go there. There you go. They do a ton with ALS users and core vocabulary lists. So there they are. Sorry, you just have to click to a new.
Yep.
Yeah.
Their
So-
website's a little old. Yeah.
I like their list because category vocab used during breaks in the employment setting.
Yeah.
If you look at individuals with autism, the unemployment rate's extremely high, and the studies that have been done have been not because of lack of job skills, but because of lack of social skills. So things like that, I mean, that's really critical for us to look at the communication competence of our adults that are going into work settings, so.
And the reason we're talking about vocabulary, of course, is like we just said, Proloquo, Touch Chat, LAMP, Dynavox, the Compass, all of the AAC apps you get, you still have to customize. And so none of them are perfect. You try to match the features of the best one for your student, right, as best as possible. They still need to be customized, and we want to make sure that you're providing a wide variety of communicative functions and intents. And so these lists will help you with that. And I love did we do the project core? I think we did later. So we're not going to spend too much time on this, but we just wanted to make sure that we gave you that link. Okay, and so what we're going to have you do now is a communication board activity. So there is a core board there, and there are 2 varieties of fringe boards. Do you want to tell them? I forget what the prompt is that you usually have them do. What they did doing for the weekend? Is that what it is?
No, I think it's in a bus ride or let's go to one of these boards.
Hang on. We forgot what the prompt was. That was Valentine's.
Right, yeah. Sorry. This one?
Go to the main board.
Forward. I think we actually have that in the slide.
What'd you say?
Yep.
You got it?
So, you have 3 boards there. So the first one's the project core, so it's 36 core vocabulary words, and then you have 2 fringe boards. So what we'd like you to do is if you have them open up, so maybe one of the group can have the core board open up, you can share, one can have one of the others. Convey something about, with the fringe boards, about what you did over the weekend that your communication partner does not know, and then try using the core board to convey that same information.
I didn't do any of those.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm in I did this assignment.
Yeah.
You've done this assignment already?
I took a class in grad school with
Ah.
Okay.
Yeah,
All right.
so we're obviously setting you up.
What do you wanna tell me how to do it?
At least you have like experience. That's my biggest.
It's like I did nothing, nobody.
No, that's my problem with my kids. I ask them what they did over the weekend and they tell me nothing.
I had one kid that told me every time he's like, I don't even know who they are.
And then we have one more fringe board, this one's on.
Some people are still not doing it. His mother, like, his mother sends us pictures of everything he does, we show him pictures.
It's like, I didn't do that. So, if it's not, so we generally talk about our weekends. Our kids might not, so we do know what they did at school. So we can talk about that. But the example is, look at the vocabulary we have access to, and can we use that vocabulary to generate novel messages? So how about with the core board?
That's what she's on.
Oh, you're on it.
Yes, I did.
Thank you.
Like,
Actually, my
somewhere,
sons.
I'm not, like, morning.
What'd you do? I honestly, I went on family house, I had dinner.
I love
You need both
I saw her
to be
Party.
Yeah, and actual. Yeah, I finished the
Party,
party, but then you
birthday
have to like watch it. And it has to pertain to what you actually did, like, it's not Valentine's Day, it's not one minute.
Not one bit, does it?
Yeah. You're right. Those people.
So we have assignments in our head that we're trying to adapt to that.
Alright, one more
So-
minute.
I had a client in the time when I was in grad school who
really not confident, just you're trying to use all of that, it's just not functional because
That works.
That
works.
What did you do? Little words, is it necessary to get?
I mean, I remember them being there for like,
It's not as hard for the
responded. But if we went to send die, look, because we can get the message across. And then, so now does it ever pass the, like, the AP test? What's that? And I thought, to an extent, like, I mean, it's like,
It's always a good stuff there.
the keywords that you need.
Also, you say, I go, and just the other one, party.
And I was like, I'm sorry.
Weird.
We were like, yeah, the study starts. All right. So, we overheard some great comments. I do wanna point out that the core board that you see there is downloadable from Project Core at the big size. You can, actually, if you have a big printer, you can, send it or download the file and go to like Staples or something else and have a big printer size so that you can tape it to your walls
And as you're communicating, you can be pointing to those core words. So I just wanted to let you know, it's the same board that you see up here. And most of the apps and companies have big classroom size core boards that you can download. Like there's one on AssistiveWare in their beta classroom for Colloquo to Go. Touch Chat has another one. So those are downloadable for your classroom. So Maureen, I overheard you say a comment that I don't know if you remember what it was, but it was a good comment.
I do recall.
Okay.
I said I cannot communicate it without a fringe. So I
Okay.
could start, but I needed more vocabulary, more fringe
Okay,
vocabulary.
right.
that was
So if you only have fringe, is that helpful? If you only have core, is that helpful?
No.
So yes, so we need a combination of both, but knowing in our heads that when we look at our core words, how many ways we can use them, but by themselves, we also need something else. So I just want to show some resources, and we do have these in the handout, that on the practical, one of the rabbit holes on the practical AAC site is a link to classroom core boards. So these are PDFs, and I'll pass them around. It's a 2-inch size and the 1-inch size. So I know in the past, so kind of that work smarter, not harder. Before I did a group, I used to always make a board for it with Board Maker and print it out and blah, 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 years ago. And now I never do that. I never make activity-specific boards because I'm not training generalization of skills for my kids. So, so now something like this, so I've got my core. In between here, it's like kind of in between core and fringe is the vocab that's used in quite a few activities, but, and not just for that activity. So it might be like some of the nouns, like apples, we might use besides, you know, making an apple pie, things like that. Whereas we have some vocab that's very activity specific. Like trolls, I don't use that a lot. You know, I might just when I'm talking about the movie or things like that. So we can print out multiples of these, but then the PDF files, and it gives you step-by-step directions on how to do this.
Yeah, I'm putting it on here
Oh,
now, we
good.
didn't have it.
Oh, sorry. So are in here, so I could go through and I could pick some specific other subjects that might not be on there. I can pick some other verbs, some other nouns, some other prepositions. And then when I'm printing off stuff, really all I have to print is the very activity specific. And that I put down here, so the real fringe vocabulary. So my students know that the core is always here in the same place. This is the stuff that I use maybe in multiple activities, but not all. And this is what I use kind of in this activity. So it just allows you to keep the same placement of vocab and kind of adapt it for that activity specific. And really you're just going to Google Images and probably printing out a couple of images. So that's the 1-inch size. You know, I often suggest making multiple copies of that front page for your students, so like each student may have something. 2-inch size is set up a little differently. And this may be for kids that are just starting direct select, or maybe for eye gaze or things like that. So all of this is PDF downloads, literally you print out and laminate.
Yep, and that's this first link under resources here. Again, practical, AAC, she gives you the whole kit and caboodle.
And then when we look at a lot of our flip core boards, here again, same thing, we've got the core down here that always remains the same. And there's multiple sites for this. You can buy one from Mayor Johnson that Alicia's used and you liked it. This one's from Board Maker Online.
I took,
Yeah, which one do you use, Judy? I love the one you
I
use.
went to Teachers Pay Teachers and I brought this,
Yeah.
it was called High Communication Flip. And I used the fringe from that.
Yep.
And then I went to Project Core.
Yep.
And I took those core words, I
Yeah.
color coded them, and I rearranged them to look more like kind of like where all the AT, you know, like eyes over here. And then I print that out as our big core board. I made it big, just by making them big and cutting and pasting them. And then I made individual books like that.
Okay.
But I like the double flip. So my flips are only
Single
single,
flips,
and they're small, and I like the double ones because it's big. I like that size.
Well, you
better.
don't have Boardmaker Online. This was a download from Boardmaker Online and they exchanged. So look at this, I have not customized this.
Like
So if
Boardmaker
I
Share?
used it with
Yeah.
my kids, obviously it would be customized.
Well, right.
But I like it because my core board's always there and these are
Yeah.
easy to flip.
And I like, and I needed to be able to say it was like research based, so I could just say, oh, because like they're like, well, where'd you get those words from? And I was like, oh, Project Core, from the core.
Right, well,
And you
so,
guys, so.
and if you look at just about any core vocab, again, the core words are only so many. So
Right.
when you look at any board, so Proloquo, Touch Chat, all of them have core
Similar,
vocabulary.
Similar.
And it's pretty much the same vocab because it's the same vocab that we all use.
So to answer, I just heard, Boardmaker Share, so Boardmaker Online, so if,
How's that?
yeah, so who has, raise your hand if you have Boardmaker Online. Okay, so not everybody. So Carol Ann and I have drunk the Kool-Aid. We resisted the Boardmaker Online for a long time because we were both really quick at using the discs. I still will use my discs if I need to make some customized boards kind of from scratch relatively quickly. That's rare that even happens anymore. But what we were, talking about with Boardmaker Online, oh dear, do you remember the password? Alright, she's got it, we'll put it in here. Is so you could still, if you only have the discs, you could still look at the Boardmaker Online, the Boardmaker Share, and download stuff. But if you have the Boardmaker Online, you can take those items that you like, and you can search for Flip Core, which I think is what Judy, did you say you did that online?
No,
I
I
used
did,
the hybrids, you didn't have it.
actually did the.
So we have one in here, which we actually used for one of your students, Sue, at one point. You can download them right to your own library and use that as a template. Then you always have it, it's always in the cloud, you don't have to remember where the heck you saved it. So there's tons of files that get shared online. Then you put it into your own library and user, and then you can customize it over time so easily. And you don't have to be on that one computer. You could, as long as you're logged in, you have all of your stuff. So I think, actually, could you go with these R's?
Then you can download it too onto your computer.
Absolutely,
So
you
you
can
have,
download
even
it.
if you stop paying for Boardmaker
Very
Online
true.
for a little bit, you still have all this, if you're, you know, like over the summer, I made a bunch, and then I needed a break, and I just downloaded everything into a file and kept it on Google Drive, cause it's big.
Right.
And you can download it as, unlike regular Boardmaker, it's PDFs, so then you don't need your Boardmaker to
You
open
can
it.
save as in regular Boardmaker as a PDF.
Oh.
You can. Yeah, but then you can't modify it later, you
Right,
know,
yeah.
it's not a Boardmaker file.
Well, I think the thing too with the disc now is that all the new computers are coming in without disc
Without
drives.
discs, yeah.
So like I've kept like, I've kind of quietly kept an old laptop.
Yeah,
just
I
in
bought an
my
external
drawer so that I
drive.
can use it, but yeah, I mean like everything's coming in and all of our desktops are actually being full.
They do,
They're not by hand, they're being worked on our desktops and all this is updated. Our kids all have it like this, so it's so like
What's that thing, or Allison, like instead of putting CDs in the books, now they're trying to flash.
So here's an example Carol Ann's on right now. This one was a flip and talk. It was a template. We still had to modify it, and it wasn't perfect, but there was, what really helped us was it had a core. We modified the core. It had the top, and they were all sized, you know, in the right location, which was nice. You didn't have to like figure out, you know, with the ruler how to put everything. So, and again, it's there, and then you download it or just add it to your own library, and then you can modify and customize it easily.
So there is a product, is it called Flip and Talk, Alicia?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. In Mayor Johnson, that it comes with software, so, and it's pretty cheap.
I have it with me.
Oh, look at you.
Not put together, I'm mid
that does allow you to customize, within it, so you can't do as much customizing as you could with BoardMaker, but again, it makes a nice book, yeah.
And then these, I have to cut them out. It came with some pre-made ones,
And how much was that, do you remember?
$50.
Yeah,
So that's like 5 months, for $50 you could get 5 months of BoardMaker online. If you buy the personal account, it's only $9.99 a month.
Yeah.
They won't sell that to the districts, it's more for the
Right,
personal account.
just showing the
for
live
BoardMaker.
stream
Yeah, this
people.
is one I customized for that student, that's his family member.
can I see the,
This is a lot of bang for your buck.
Right, right.
It is,
Yeah.
yeah.
Yep.
We don't have BoardMaker online, and this was
Yeah.
I've never built a flipbook before, and we have a parent that's like, we need it now, so it was
Yeah.
a quick, it can
Right.
be here in
Yep.
2 days.
So,
and
for the $50, it does come with this, which is, these are really durable.
Yeah, that is nice.
So it,
The
and-
paper is not, just to describe it to the people, that it's not like cardstock, it's like
plastic.
thick, flexible plastic, yeah, yeah. Here,
Plastic.
I'm just, is it okay, are you okay if we pass this
Yeah.
around?
Did you say that came from BoardMaker online?
Mayor Johnson.
And it comes with a disc that's got, all of those, so you can reprint those. You open them in BoardMaker, and you can modify them, so this is one that I made that's got like
Nice
his
stuff.
mom, dad.
Yeah, so you can
whatever
add
they
your
want.
own photos too, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. So, some places I go to that,
Sticker back.
they don't want BoardMaker online. They don't want anything that's gonna be a subscription service, or even, looking at when our individuals are adults and are in a day program or things like that. BoardMaker online, I love it, but the learning curve to learn it was pretty high compared to the old BoardMaker. So knowing that there are other resources that you can access can be helpful for some, districts, some programs.
Okay, and the reason we're talking about core is, of course, what is the biggest strategy for using and teaching AAC beyond requesting? And we can't say it enough, we've said it in the past, the most research-based way to teach communication and language is modeling, 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 without even necessarily expecting our kids to say anything back anytime soon. And I have teams that get very impatient with that. I have BCBAs that want to write programs, they're very well-meaning, want to write programs to get the kids to talk in MAND. And that's not natural communication all the time. And I'm not saying it doesn't have a place, right, or a function. But in general, when we're talking about teaching interactive, generative communication, we have to model all the time, all day, appropriate vocabulary. And what we just saw is you can't communicate without core and fringe, right? So we need to make sure the vocabulary that we're using is useful.
And so when, Nicole says we need to model for hours, we need to model for days and months and sometimes years. So if we think about our typically developing child, and we figure half the time they're awake, and if a child is awake, we're always talking to them. Always. You just can't not talk to a baby. So they get, I think it's like around 18,000 hours of modeling before they produce their first word, around 8 or 9 months.
At least at the earliest, yeah.
If we look at our AAC kids, they get no modeling of AAC as they're growing up, for the most part. So don't even think of AAC as a different language, think of it as a different language plus. So most of our kids that are learning a second language are getting that verbal language modeling. AAC is a visual language, so it's not even like it's something that they're going to hear, it's something that they need to see.
Hear and see, right.
Hear and see. So we need to model the whole time we're talking to our students, and we need to model how we're messing up, cause I mess up all the time when I'm using AAC, and how we repair that, and just continue and continue and continue, and we can't expect our kids to reply to us for maybe a long time. The first time they do, you will have tears in your eyes, but that modeling is really critical, and the research really supports that is the make or break. And the modeling doesn't stop when a kid starts using it, it just goes and goes and goes. So the research also supports, and I think it was Joanne Cafiaro did a study, and this was specific to kids with autism, but where they used aided language STEM over the summer. So they took baseline, used it over the summer, took data at the end of the summer, and all the kids really expanded in everything they did with AAC from getting that stimulation. But then the kids went back to their school year program and people weren't modeling, and all their data went back to baseline. So it's not something we just do as the kids are learning it, it's something that we do for the rest of the child's life.
And also, when we start talking to our kids, and if they don't start speaking, we don't stop.
Right.
Same
Yeah.
thing with AAC modeling.
Yeah.
If we're modeling for a year and they're still not using it generatively, that doesn't mean we just stop.
Right.
We might need to tweak something,
Yeah.
but in general, we continue to model as much as possible.
Right, it's not like we say to babies, dang, you know, after a month of modeling, you're not talking, I'm gonna stop talking to you. We just do it and do it and do it.
So I love this continuum of usefulness. We're just going to, you know, obviously I want up more. These have tons of functions. The ones in the middle, depends.
So they're used more than the fringe,
Yeah.
and they're important, but they're not used as much as the core.
Right.
And there's a word for them, and I forget what it is.
Yeah, I do too. Feels like a Friday. It's not.
It does.
All right, actually, I think what we'll do, let's skip the continuum of usefulness, but let's do this one. So, if you guys could go to slide 9. Thank you, Sue. Slide 9. And work with a partner or your team. And what we'd like to do is, because we're talking about the modeling, and I know as speech therapists or as special educators, you know, we are not with our students all day long, right? At the most, I don't know, I mean, when I was in the schools, most of my highest level kids in terms of service got 4 half hours a week. Well, how about you? What's the maximum you're seeing your kids for speech?
Hour and a half.
An hour and a half for the whole week?
Yeah.
Yep. My kids are going half hour a week.
1 half.
2 half hours, so 1 hour total.
Right. So, in that amount of time, you know, when I look back at what I did and what I could have done differently, and when were we most successful, it had nothing really to do with me in a room with that kid for a half hour. It really didn't. Now, don't get me wrong. I, of course, had to build a rapport with the student. I know, I know, right? And I'm not saying I had to develop a relationship with the student. There were certainly times when I wanted to do things in private or model in private, and I'm not saying that there's not a use for that, but when were we most successful? It was when I was working with staff, with paraeducators, in the classroom environment, in their typical routines, showing them how to model and use and incorporate AAC throughout the day. So, and that's what the research shows, and it's not just for AAC, it's for really a lot of speech and language intervention and special ed intervention as well. And I know that some of this starts at the top in terms of needing to collaborate and flexible scheduling and that type of thing, but that's a whole nother, you know, inclusion workshop, but we could talk a little more about that at some point. But what we'd like you to do now is look at this instructional routines vocabulary and talk to each other and brainstorm what things you could say just with this pretty rudimentary. So a 36 core board, and that was part of the problem with that other activity. You only had 36 core words. Really, there's about 200, 250 at least core words. But look at just using this core board. What are the things things you could model and say just in the routine of getting off the bus and going to the kids' classroom or the van. So take 2 minutes, just brainstorm some ideas on the left side, what you can say with this 36 message core board about that instructional routine. Brainstorm those words that you could say and model to them. And you'll see the ones in bold are the ones they're modeling, those examples. If you're live streaming, feel free to chat or text me.
Put on your back of the services. Yeah, you're modeling it, you're trying to.
Because it wasn't, some people I think were trying to get it out and saying that's not the right link. And other people were saying, well, taking that link and putting it out there. So I don't know, I have to see what it is. Because Jen never helped.
So how did you move the
But in Oscar right now, I did it here. Share. But when you're in the tab strategy, you can't share yet. There's a way to share it on the create ones. I'll show you. I can show you after. And I thought that's what I did. I mean, I can't imagine it makes a new link when you go live. That wouldn't make sense. It's worked before, so it must have been something I did.
All of our goals right now, in-house meetings on race
We do, I haven't used it.
It's in the library.
Yeah.
The only reason I know when I run the library is we have a group. And I'm like, okay. And then I've noticed that I'll be second there. My oldest, I'm not sure.
I've never noticed it, I have seen it. Is it the Alice training? Yeah. Oh, he's a nice guy.
All right, one more minute.
And then this one, this is like, it was, this one, and it was just a little bit different, but it was like, the person was like, someone who's in fabric.
Okay, so what'd you come up with? What types of comments, questions, phrases did you come up with just based on this core board that you could model? Go ahead.
Open the door.
Mm-hmm. You probably would say that about 2 to 3 times, right? The van door gets open, the school door gets open, the classroom door gets open, you might be going to a bathroom, their locker might get opened. Open. Very, very early word and very functional. What else?
What's that if they have a toy in their hand?
Mm-hmm.
Look at that.
Look, lots of look, right? Look, see. Mm-hmm.
I mean, lots of what's that if you think a typical kid.
Oh my gosh.
I cannot.
Mm-hmm.
Who's on the bus?
Who is on the bus? Mm-hmm. Who's that? What else?
Could be talking about the peers where?
Mm-hmm.
She, where is he?
Where is he? Yep. I had a core board with one kid, and then On this side, we did for his morning routine, because he loved the janitor and the principal. And so we had certain people on that side. And that was his big motivation. You know, sometimes he would ground and we couldn't get him up. He's a big kid with Down syndrome. And we got him off the bus eventually every time. And he stopped grounding coming into school by saying, you know, we're going, you know, pointing to go, and then the principal's name. What else? I mean, that was a huge motivator for the student and the janitor. He loved the janitor.
More go off, I said, like
Yeah.
more kids are getting off the
Mhm.
bus. All of them are off the bus if you stand there and wait long enough.
Yeah. Yeah.
She is, he is.
Tons, right? You could pretty much say almost anything. So why did we bring this up right now?
For modeling.
For modeling, right? And to talk about if you can be training the staff that are with your kid, or anybody, and it might not all your students have paraeducators or anything like that, peers, janitors, models, peer models, classroom teachers, aides that are getting kids on and off the bus. If you can be working with those people to be modeling, think about what you could be doing for your kids throughout the day, as opposed to the 1.5 hours max that you're directly seeing them. Does that make sense? Okay. Okay, so I think what we'll do is we'll take a quick break for about 5 minutes, and then we'll come back and explore the matrix briefly. Before we take a break, raise your hand. Who's used the communication matrix? Okay, sort of, kind of? Okay. So 5 minutes, come on back, stretch your legs. There's a bathroom right around the corner. There's also vending machines in the cafeteria over there if you need some caffeine or snacks or anything like that.
When I click on it, it says it's not a secure.
Just go to advanced and say allow. Sometimes that happens.
I did, and I'm
And it's not letting you get on. So are you on Wi-Fi as yes?
Yeah.
And you're getting that as yes?
Yeah, it's a certificate error.
So what site are you trying to get
The
on?
Mayor Johnson flip book.
And you're on as yes?
Really, she said I can come and just see.
Because it's not letting us know there because it's a website that knows
So
stuff, but it
eventually
should let you go there.
Transfer them towards it. And then
Is it about
communication opportunities. They will. It takes
Yeah, this is the link right from Carol and the eval she did for one of the students. For this, for that.
Turkey dinner.
Yeah, I mean, it won't let me open it. I tried opening it in, multiple browsers.
He's not.
Oh, yours, it let me go with it.
Finally give me a link.
Oh.
But now she's not private.
So, Carolyn says,
So a lot of times I show the analogy of how long it takes to
He's not.
and that we model for them again.
I'll make sure she doesn't
People
have
have to know.
She
Probably never consider it.
Um,
And when they start
We'll drive
talking,
by.
even if it's unclear, we still continue talking.
I turn on my
And that really is that
I mean,
time,
that's,
a lot of
like I
our
said, that's
kids
the
are
link
really
right from
just
Carol's
don't talk for a long time, they're taking it in.
eval stuff, and that's where we got it from.
I do see, people, I think, say they do. You know, people think we give them materials. Like, it's like if we give a kid a part, we teach them how to drive. It's the same, you know, the same types of things, so.
What you might wanna do is, I think,
Yeah, she
can you, so you can adjust, this is good time. But then, what you can also do, I don't know if you've seen the project core modules, the professional development modules. Have you gone through it with them? They're self-directed ones, they're short, I just put the link to it on the resources. There's a beginning core, but like universal core, beginning communicators. And so you can click on this, and it gives you a little video, I don't think they're rather long, so you can tell. That one's 18 minutes, so quick little snippets. And then this is research based.
I'm sorry, Kat,
Oh my gosh. I can't really help you say, she just found it. I don't know, but you know, it is all, it talks about the research and what we should be doing. I don't know, there's definitely very, I don't think it's very explicitly, too. So that could be a place to start with that, I don't know how much time you have, work with the teacher and, director of the program, whatever to say, can we get some time looking for some nice long relationship. Because they're really functional and you could probably do one-on-one, you know, cause this is just, it gives you background, language and functional, talking about it right here. And then it's individual and then instructional with the teams.
I'm like, oh,
So it gives you some insight.
clearly, you get stuff from the chair.
I know, it's frustrating and kids don't look it up.
I think there's some public stuff, but you need board makers to print it out, unless you save it as a PDF, in the print function.
Yeah, I mean, because we have our discs.
Oh, so if you have the disc, some of the things you can get when you pop in your disc, because it's the same activity. Not all of the things, would work in the disc format, and it depends on what disc you have.
I have two different ones.
So, because there's Board Maker that is just print out stuff, there's Board Maker Plus or Board Maker version 6, which is interactive, and there's Board Maker version dynamic, which is also interactive.
I have Stevie and
Okay, so it's interactive, you just won't be able to use all the online stuff, but a lot of the things in the activities page you should still be able to open up.
But then when we switched up jobs, we realized that was actually too big. Hitting it, but not necessarily yeah. So we have to kind of slow down on that, but like we said, he's telling people first that it is hard time, and then have this option of, would you like regular tea or tea? And then help yourself to so fast, and choose a spot if you're highlighting, and it was so great that another student, so they're just kind of like having him hit it without like even just like helping.
And so a lot of times, I don't expect my kid to respond to everything, I don't expect all kids to respond to everything. So even letting the para know, so this week, he's gonna be responding to that. So that way he can prep himself, he's got repetition, he's got to practice things like that, rather than the happy touching with someone directing my hand, so I have no control over it, so I'm not really vested to begin with. And I would have some wait time in there, because that peer pressure with wait, I've let my kid practice this though without me, so that they can practice. But then with the peers, I'd rather have the peers give them a little nudge than the parent. But the other thing, they can also, I can waive good practice, so everything doesn't have to be vocal output. And, as, I was observing, and a kid went into the office, and one of his goals was to use his vocal output, say hi. And he went up to each lady in there and he said hi and they had a little exchange and he got extra.
It was,
baby
yeah,
sheets.
it really was.
Yeah.
Yes,
So
it is.
it's a whole different
Yeah.
world. You know, that
So I can't wait to
don't
hear how
know.
the call was today. It's so funny.
In the classroom.
Was saying, yes, so, but if he's doing that, so he's being expected to do every response in
Yeah.
school or just
But
that.
I kept telling myself, once it's in place,
Once
it's
it's done,
done,
we're
getting
getting
it
it
here.
done.
So, yeah, it's so fun.
And that's like, that is, I'm more looking at like.
So then, yeah,
participation.
right, so then looking at like a prompt hierarchy
And
and
that's what
how
I
am I
think
prompting
some
him?
of
And there are times if he doesn't
And
respond,
so
what happens to the other kids if they
Well,
don't
realize
respond?
that.
Right, don't have to
And he
come
has
up
to
with
say,
that.
right, because the other thing, some of our kids use that passivity as control.
Yeah.
And when they don't
But
respond,
you just
they
gotta
don't
compete with that. You're right. But we are not real here.
So it goes beyond the processing, and that's the response he's being required to do. And he's had plenty of practice, then he's choosing to pass, but I, as an adult, may take his advice and say, you chose to pass, but I'm gonna say, I'm passing today. So I'm still modeling it. So, but I would still give him a little playtime before he chose to pass. But there's natural consequences of.
I'm not gonna tell you the whole story for that, but it's fine.
I think it is hard in a typical classroom, and that's why, I think going to teach calc and maybe running some small groups, that can't happen. Then doing like a snap lunch or a lunch bunch, but for some, so there's an article in here.
And you can make them there, cause you're like, they did that when I was out.
And I don't, I would give a kid just as much as I give another. But not to every practice, but I'm modeling fun things we talk about. So just the requesting the practice, that's just requesting. But once we get it, we talk, that's using it as a menu for communication. This is a really good article here.
Yeah, I might be able to share it with you.
Okay, definitely, yeah, okay, if you have them, if you have PDF on any of them, I'd love to look at them, they have great articles.
Yeah.
And a lot of these, I don't think kids are on the same.
But that doesn't mean that kids requesting it, and now I'm sure some teachers, so I may not be requiring him or expecting him to start talking about it, but I'm talking sometimes
Alexa, please.
without like some model.
Yeah, yeah, that would
Encourage
be
you
nice.
to do that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, so here, yeah, it's hard, it's online.
I don't have to say.
I don't know if I'm getting it because
That was
I'm,
me,
I can get the old version, the newer one.
okay,
I will try to
okay.
find.
I'll look, I think there's a, the person I can log
So I give
into.
at least.
Alright.
Just send me a reminder, you'll get it there too, if you don't mind emailing me.
Yeah.
But right now, it's also the model.
I didn't get the impression like, oh man, I should say.
But I would not make
So I would do that.
Because I'm like, I'm trying to think of like whole wise,
I
where
have,
do they
like-
need to be when they leave here?
I'm exaggerating a little bit,
I
like I
used
might
to,
get
when I
very.
first started in the field, I
More
used
like
to go
routine,
now.
yeah, that kind of stuff. That's what we're
Granted,
looking
I
at now.
rotate some of those snacks, so I try to get in a few of those.
Yeah.
But while they're eating, I'm talking and I'm eating too.
Yeah.
So, when I say I'm
One more
talking,
minute.
the thing is going because I'm talking with her as well, so I'm modeling the whole thing.
Right.
So again, it's input, input,
Sure, you
input,
can't
and
say
maybe a while before I get output, but that input's great.
I see the kids, I see the masses of kids watching.
Yeah, and I already know because
We
yeah,
teach our own kids that teaches that. And in my classroom, she was in the kids watch it.
so it's all the vocabulary.
No, I wanna expose more.
It really is no time.
Yep, they
We're getting
can't
a lot
say
of
it in
pushback.
English, they can't save it if you don't have it.
Especially with the thing that
And if this morning
you go from 8 to 8:30 and then you
can have it back.
There's no 10-minute transition.
I deliver the kids sometimes, I'm like, I don't have time
But if he doesn't have one,
No.
yeah, how can you
Yeah.
be modeling it, and
No.
how can he say it?
It's just kind of. There's no process. So like we had it, it was very interesting, and I'm glad that they did this, but they had a fire.
To be able to model it, you need like yourself need to know where the
Right,
vocabulary is.
but then I say to the kids,
So I
say
think that
kids
it
as an
actually
example, one for local, I think it's under lunch.
Did it, so kids were
And I can
half
never
there at the
remember if
door.
it's under one or not, and I happen to walk in.
And one class
somewhere
ends at
where
11:05,
Yeah.
So I may be, you know what?
You're talking about like four, like I think.
We should get like a, I think
I'm
our
just highlight how it's something to eat,
No,
or
no,
go to
no,
school.
yeah.
You know what, sometimes it's fun, sometimes they have
Could you
a
go in
fun.
the gyms in the third, in
Let
the
me go to
basement?
gym.
Right.
If you're in
No
eighth grade.
kids. Let me go
So
back,
the way
maybe
that it
it's
really
under
works
lunch.
is
So I talk, I don't know a kid's device when I'm playing with it. I talk out loud my strategies of trying to figure out how to get there. So I'm showing you tips.
I'm hitting a lack of effort.
You know what, that's what they're paid for.
No.
But I'm also modeling, because a lot of the parents look like they're failing in front.
Right.
So I model to the parents, I don't know,
Yeah.
dang, you know?
Yeah.
So I model that failure a lot to the parents. And I may videotape myself
Yeah.
and share it, so they can look at it over and over and over. Cause I do find a lot of times when I ask other people to use these devices, they find it very intimidating.
Yeah.
Oh, this done is
And maybe this will help.
I'm just gonna pass this around.
Yep. Okay, thanks for coming back.
So we're gonna pull it back. I know we mentioned a couple of the ASHA leaders, so I did turn down the page in these two. These were recent ones, and there's another one all about AAC. So this one has a great article, the fun one. Focus on fun, words will follow. I really liked that article because I like doing fun things. And then where our links came from today. And then the ASHA that just came out has info on using Alexa for your kids to control. And again, we want buy-in from our kids. So there's a good example in this about a gentleman with cerebral palsy who would never use his device until he got hooked up to Alexa. So in general, the voices on the applications are recognized by Alexa. So it's really cool for a kid who hasn't had control to now have control over things using Alexa. And even things like, you know, Alexa, tell me a joke. Stuff like that. So there was one kid I worked with that was his job at dinner every night. He told like the joke of the day type of thing.
And I have an example, one of my favorite from when I was first starting out, this student, his name was Tariq. I'll never forget him, and he had cerebral palsy, and we were working on this switch, and we were 90% sure we had the right switch site. It was like a little finger micro light switch that he could reach out and touch. We were pretty sure that was the right one, we just wasn't motivated to do it until finally someone farted in class. And we saw him laugh, and we went out to Spencer's and adapted a fart machine.
Yeah.
And that's what got this kid, and I mean, we're laughing, but he was 6 years old, and I know
Very
my
appropriate.
7-year-old son, he's still, like I said before, but it was what got him to start reaching out and accessing his switch. And we used, then we made a whole scripted routine over this fart machine, and people had to say, oh, that was disgusting, and oh my, who did it, and it was this whole thing, but it's what got him using his switch. So that was the old school Alexa at that point, and that was what was motivating for him.
And that's why I love the article in there that have fun, the words will follow. Because if we're not starting at a motivational point, it's not gonna work. It's just like the same for us. Am I motivated right now to go to Weight Watchers? No. Last night was the deadline for the free month, and I was like, dang, I missed it again, so it's like we do what we're motivated to do. Am I motivated to go home and like sew or knit? Yes. Hopefully that's what I will do today. For our kids too, if we're starting in right at the curriculum, It's like, you know, and I look at IEP objectives and we'll identify 5 words in the curriculum, and I'm like, does he want to? If the answer is no, it's not gonna happen for an AAC user if they don't have communication competence in those areas. We have to start at fun and motivation.
So how do you write them? I'm sorry.
Mm-hmm.
But so, since we have somebody looking at all our IEPs now, and it's all about the curriculum, and I work with a very, you know, involved population,
Yeah.
a group of children who have a lot of involvement. How would you write them so that you're tapping into the fun and then making your boss happy because she's seeing?
So I would write, so a lot of the access around core vocabulary words, so I would write it around using so many core words to during motivating activities or a variety of functions for motivation or things like that. But I would still have vocabulary in there and around these core words, because certainly those core words would tie into the Common Core.
Okay.
Is it, you're supposed to be standards based, Judy? Is that what she's looking for?
Well, they're looking for how our kids are working on the Common Core in the classroom. So like, you know, so I can't really write, well, you know,
Access
I
to
can't
curriculum,
write that because they won't, it's like you said, they won't do that, so I can't write that.
Well, and it's not that, it's just, it might not, if we look at usefulness of vocabulary, so we go back to that usefulness continuum, and I look at the curriculum vocab, where does that fall on the usefulness of vocabulary? So the lady that, the high school kid that loved her sister, literally when I looked at her device, she had on there Macbeth, those witches' names, I don't know who those witches are.
Still not useful now.
And things like that. So I went into each subject, she had vocab like that. And I'm like, 5 years from now, she's not gonna know who Macbeth was. I can tell you from experience. I forgot which one Macbeth was until I found out from her it was the one with the witches in there. So we have to also tie in that continuum of usefulness. And in my head, every single objective I'm writing, I need to be able to say 5 years, will this be useful, and where is it leading my child?
No, I get that. It's
Yeah.
just trying to make it worded right so that the other person reading it says, oh, okay, she's doing.
So then the focus really, if we look at core vocab, that is, I mean, that's a life skill. That will,
Then they see vocab and they're happy,
Yeah.
and I know that it's.
and those words,
Yeah.
and so looking at that, like, I want my kids to use that same word for multiple meanings and multiple activities.
Yeah.
That definitely would tie into the Common Core. Yeah.
Also, I think I have the right link here.
So I do wanna let you know that questionnaire I mentioned that I use, the link is now in your resources. And no, it was a Word doc, so when I put it up into Google, the formatting for the pictures got weirded out, but I don't think you can figure it out.
So I think I put the right link in
Yeah.
here. We're a little far afield, but I know it's helpful. It's gonna answer. So have you guys
Yeah.
seen the MCAS?
This is a great
I took it.
resource, yes.
All right, you took it. So it's the Massachusetts Curriculum Framework for Kids with Significant, so there's the Massachusetts assessment. They have a whole
Yeah.
framework to help students with disabilities access the Common Core. They've updated it.
It's
awesome.
really,
It
it
is
is great.
phenomenal. So, and it says, it gives you
Yeah.
examples for AAC devices.
this definitely
It's
for
gonna give
you.
it gives you examples of goals and objectives that are, so it'll talk about the standard, and then it
That's
talks
right,
about
yeah.
access points. So what would be an access point to the standard for your students? Massachusetts is so far ahead in terms of.
Minus
Go.
their frameworks, their portfolios you have to do.
Right.
You don't have to do those.
Right, yeah, you don't have to do the board right there. So they have to do a whole alternate assessment, right? And then use it, and so it's very complicated and convoluted a little, it's very hard. But in general, the frameworks, which is what I've put on here, is gonna help you write your IEP goals and objectives. And it used to have, suggested activities, etc.
And where is that now, Nicole?
So I put it on the
resources
resources.
handout.
handout under Massachusetts frameworks.
Okay, great.
So, I think, let me just make sure I put the right link to get you to the actual, yeah, so here they are. It's gonna take you to the curriculum frameworks. There's resource guides there. There's a manual for the all assessment. You don't really have to worry about that, or the portfolio, but it gives you some really good ideas, and they even have STEM up there already.
Yeah.
Great. Look at that.
Yeah. It's good stuff.
amazing the amount of work they did on this.
I mean, we could spend 3 hours going through the framework and helping you write, standards-based IEP goals and objectives just for AAC. But you'll see there's access points there, and so that's probably what your director is, I'm assuming, is
They
talking
even
about.
put like attending to the materials
Yes.
is a skill. So
Which
if
it
they're
is.
like, yeah, when
It is,
it's really
right.
profound kids, it's eyes open.
Yeah,
Perfect.
so,
Stay
so
focused.
this is pre-K.
Nice. That's awesome.
Let me,
Thank you.
let me just, I'm trying to, here. Make it a little bigger, oops. But with prompting and support, ask and answer questions about a story or poem, acting out characters, showing rhythmic structure of a poem. So these are the standards, and then there's all sorts of adaptations. I think these are just the regular standards.
And then
Those are the
and
regular.
then
Yeah, oh, there we
this
go.
is
Yeah.
Here we go.
So
So
it's less
access
complex,
skills.
more, yeah.
Is right here. So, right, the student will functionally use materials, so locate partially hidden or out of sight objects.
and if you go back is the entry points.
Attending visually, go back over here,
Yeah, those are the entry points.
right here, there we go. Identify key details,
Entry points.
illustrate, produce relevant, access skills, respond to
There we go.
materials representing a key idea, track materials representing a key idea, grasp,
That's
hold,
perfect. That's it right there.
release or give.
Perfect.
And this is of course about literacy.
Right, but that's exactly, that's
Yeah.
exactly what's gonna help me do that.
Yep, good, okay.
Thank you. You're welcome.
Okay, so back to the communications piece. We kind of modified our matrix activity. I know some of you have seen it before, and some of you haven't. The communication matrix is free. You need to create an account. I would suggest, especially if you're a speech language pathologist and you're working with beginning communicators, and they consider a beginning communicator any kid who's really just starting to use language, put 2-3 words together, is the maximum of the matrix, and doing that symbolically. So it starts with individuals with significant and profound communication issues in terms of non-symbolic, pre-symbolic, pre-intentional communication, and it goes down to students who are using language. So what I wanted to show you though, actually, yeah, can we go to the, this one right there. The one right next to it. There you go. So this is an example of a real student that, there's no identifying information, maybe initials, but that I've worked with. So this is an example of what the matrix looks like at the end. It looks like this. It's picture-based, well, it's colored. On the left side are the language levels. And on the right side, yeah, if you can go all the way down, Carol Ann, you'll see from the bottom left to right are all different language functions. And what I want to show you though, actually Caroline, can you just go down to the bottom really quick, is when we're looking at the bottom row, refuse, obtain, social, and information. So what are those right there? The reasons why we communicate. Now, it's not completely exact. So, refusing and obtaining, what do you think that is? Wants and needs. And so you'll see C1 through C7, so there's 7 different boxes just for wants and needs. And there's only, how many? 17 communicative functions for beginning communicators. So wants and needs are important, but what we're going to look at is it's not just making requests. So here's the issue I have with this one is the social part. There's only one social. but we talked about there's 2 different ways we communicate for reasons we communicate socially. So they've put them together. So requesting attention, showing affection, those are social closeness, right? But then some of these things, polite social forms, greeting people, it's more etiquette.
Right.
So they've combined the social part together. It's not really a big deal, but just so you know, we kind of consider them separate. And then the last one is information. So that's the information transfer part. So what we're going to do is, so typically what you do is you put some information about your student, you meet as a team, and it's important to not just do it yourself as one person. Your teammates, your paras, your special ed teacher, sometimes parents, everybody involved with this student is going to give you the really broad, look at what the student can do. So I suggest as much as possible you do it with the team. And so you'll see here that if the student has surpassed it, you just kind of skip over that in the matrix. It asks you very functional questions. And then if it's yellow, that means it's emerging. It has only happened, with one person or in one context. And mastered means it's across multiple partners, multiple contexts. So you'll see this student, and it's kind of funny, you'll see this a lot where they're using multiple ways to communicate, but not always using those functions depending on the language level, if that makes sense. So this is actually a kid who uses speech to communicate right now, but all of the speech he uses is pretty much either echolalic or prompted by an adult. So they have to get him started. So, if it was, what do you want? And, they'll sit there and wait, and then he won't say anything, and then they'll say, I want, and then he'll say, I want, and then maybe he'll fill it in. Or they have to give him the initial phoneme, which drives me nuts. And I get why people do it. I'm guilty of it too, but if you are giving a kid the initial phoneme to a word, that's not necessarily, that's a prompt. You're prompting the student.
It's a pretty high level prompt.
Right. So this is a student who has some decent language in there, but he's not using any of it independently right now. So we're going to start using some AAC with him because he's actually starting to read. He's like the kid you mentioned the last time. With visual supports, he can be pretty independent. So what we're going to have you do in the interest of time.
So before Nicole goes on, I just want to say one of the things I really like with the communication matrix is that everybody has some skills. So
Yes.
I work a lot with individuals that are very, very involved. I'm working presently with a couple of individuals that are home-based because of medical health reasons, very compromised little pumpkins that I did this on, and they all had skills. And a lot of times when we do testing, these are kids that bottom out before the first question. So why do we even do the testing? Because parents have experienced enough of that failure. But this is something that I can show the parents and say, look at this, Joey is da-da-da, and he has these emerging skills, and it gives you ideas on what we can do for goals. So for that reason, I really like it because kids can have success. So, and for teams that are working with students that are very involved, it can be really hard to think of what skill do I need to work on for this child that, maybe we're lucky if he's responding to anything.
And I find sometimes that people get discouraged.
Mm-hmm.
And so it helps you see progress, even because it's progress in a way that they're not thinking of it,
Right.
like captures those little
Yeah.
incremental
Yeah.
changes that maybe
Yeah.
we see, but that the other people can't
Yeah.
see it, but then when they see it on paper, the
Right.
color changed.
Yes, and that,
know,
right,
that's
so it is a
motivating
nice
for them.
comparison. And yes, but, one of the homebound students, last time I was there, he smiled when he heard my voice, and I mean, that was like,
Yeah.
and his mom was there, so she's like, he really responded to you. I mean, that's huge for this family, so, yeah. It was huge for me too.
Of course. And what Judy was saying, that the color change, unfortunately I don't have in mind one student with multiple matrices, but if you were to hit play here and you had a few of them, it will actually show you a time lapse over time. See how it's doing it now, but nothing's happening, of the boxes getting filled in, which is a really neat thing to see. I'm gonna stop this now because she's gonna flash and give us all. So this part of the matrix is free. Yeah, question.
I think on the top of the Google Doc where it says sample communication matrix,
Yeah.
it says communicationmatrix.com. I think it's .org.
It's definitely .org.
Yeah.
Yeah. Where do you see it?
If you click here,
Oh, okay.
and
This
then
one?
at the yep.
Oh,
Yeah, and
Oh,
okay,
yeah.
so this
thank
is
you.
something different.
Yeah, this is something different, but
Oh,
good, no,
okay.
thank you for telling me that, so that was the next piece that we were gonna show you. So this is the free
Yeah.
part.
Okay.
You get this, and if you know what you're doing, or you don't need suggestions, you can just run with it. Now, if you pay $6, they will give you a report based on this student. Now, like Judy just said, it's worth it. What we've done though, is we've taken, so they give you a report with sample suggestions at each language level. So what we've done is we've taken those and created this document. So if you go to,
Yeah, so Alicia, the first link from the matrix is .org. Well, when you click the here, that's the doc. Does that make sense?
yeah, she was talking up here, I said .com up
Oh,
here,
got it.
yeah, so I
Beautiful.
changed it.
So,
So-
and then,
Go ahead,
no, it's fine. I figured it out.
you figured it out, okay, cause I had this .com.
Oh, got
Yeah.
it.
Right?
got it.
Because I was trying to get to like the matrix where
matrix,
you
Gotcha.
fill it
yeah,
out, and
okay.
that's
Gotcha.
you have to go to that website first,
Yeah,
and
Yeah.
then access the free part.
yeah. So what we've done, we were gonna have you run through a whole matrix, we don't have time, so we wanna show you everything else we have to show you. So this is a document that has all of the suggestions from the matrix put into it. So what we're gonna have you do now is we're gonna assign each group a level that the student was, and we want you to look at the activities based on that level. So what you'll see is, so if I were to assign you level 1 and let's say C1 in level 1, it gives you a description of each level, some general goals for that level, and then specific suggestions for that level. And I should have said A1, because A is the, so A, and this level 1, is we're talking pre-intentional, this student is not responding, sounds close to maybe what your student is, he's
Definitely,
pre-intentional right now. So a response to Carol Ann's voice is huge progress. So what you'll see as it goes down, obviously the language gets more complex, and the goals and the specific activities get more complex. So we wanted to show you this because this could help you if you're using AAC supports and strategies for your kids. Remember, the first 7 are the requests, right? The wants and needs. But 8 through 17 are all sorts of things you could do with your students. So we'll assign you all a language level for this student, and then we'll go from there. So anybody who's live streaming, let's see. So oftentimes when we look here, you want to start, we like to start with the more complex language with a function we know they already have or is emerging. Not that you can't start with something brand new, but if they were requesting attention using an unconventional way of communication, so this particular student gets people's attention, can anybody guess how? In a non-symbolic way? Screaming. He's a screamer, he's a protester, right? But he'll to get people's attention. So we know he knows how to do it. We want to replace that with a more conventional, right, socially appropriate way. So why don't we let's just have the whole group. Let's just do that. I think that's easier. So that is right here, C8. So let's have the whole group look at level 7. So if you go to that document, level 7, C8, and I'll put this on the board so we know what we're doing. And I want you to look at the description of level 7, C8. So look at the description, and then look at some of the intervention activities. And talk amongst the group once you're done with that about how you could incorporate them into the classroom. So it's level 7, C8 on that document. Look at the document and look at their suggestions. Now this is a kid who we're going to use AAC with at level 7. We're going to use Proloquo to go with, let's say. And we want him to be able to communicate level 7, C8 using AAC throughout the environment. How could you help that? What types of interventions could you do? And tell us if this document's helpful. We'll give you a few minutes. Same thing with the live streamers. So go to level 7, C8.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'm still getting there.
So you might have to use Control F to help you find level 7 and go all the way down. It's Roman numerals. Yeah.
Page 34. Yeah, page 34.
34, page 34. Thank you.
Out of it.
Are the page numbers even there?
On the right, like, when you're scrolling.
Oh,
So
I'll
what
put
page is
page
it?
Page 34, and I'm gonna
Thank
put
you.
the page numbers in.
So, C8.
So go ahead and find it and look at it. How would you do this in the classroom? Using voice output communication.
You're saying how we model it?
What would you do? What would your goals be? What would your objectives be? How would you teach it?
I know, that helps. Keep moving.
As people keep touching it?
Yes.
Is this one sent as copy?
No. No. No.
So, we do ask for this doc, that if you're gonna use it and add stuff in, just make a copy to put it on your hard drive, so.
And credit the communication matrix.
Yes, yeah. No, you could use that progress monitoring.
Yeah.
Well, so yearly you can update it to show the progress. I wouldn't do it for, every quarterly update, because that's gonna be your goal for objectives, like you're updating. But you can take, this to get goals and objectives from. So if you're looking at doing the matrix on a kid and you see where it's emerging, that's something you could have as an objective for, more consistency, and looking at, where they don't have the skills, so sequentially giving you ideas for goals and objectives, yes.
Right. Right. Yep. I agree with the functional communication.
I get done
For a lot of
writing
my
and I'm
kids,
like, why did I write
yeah,
this?
it's kind of like a busybody thing because we had to do an assessment.
Yeah.
And I'd rather do something like this that gave me ideas for what goals and objectives.
And we did some standards.
Let me see if I can get it.
That's okay, I just actually see it when I wrote my
Wow.
Steve had 78 on it.
Wow.
83 on it.
Wow. Wow.
But
So
that's
for
not
him,
how he does his label.
yeah, okay. So I was gonna say for him, like the lower part of it could be really
I am
good.
gonna.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's actually out.
That's what just really stood out for him. I'm like, report that. Because really what I see when
Yeah.
I'm so speech. So
Yeah.
far, and rice and sugar, it kind of works the same way.
Right, right.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, visually, yeah.
Right, you're on your own rabbit hole down there.
So, for this, because I really want the parents' input, like I would prefer doing it as a team. I mean, it's not,
Great art.
it's not standardized, and there are no age equivalencies, so for me, it's not necessarily an assessment as much as,
Because that, I mean, that's how it is in the
Yeah.
social communication profile.
yeah, but do your parents sign off for you to do that?
And I've been told by districts you can use it because it's a profile, a protocol, and that it's not an assessment,
Okay,
is what I've been told.
So we can.
I mean, that's what I would
That's what I've
think,
been
so,
told, But you probably have to talk to your, I've at, 2 districts have, we talked to the director, and they've,
yeah.
I mean, most families I
Right.
don't think would mind, it's just I'm going.
Yeah, I mean, I would want the parents' input in doing it, because a lot of my kids are very different at home than they are,
I almost
you know, at
wonder
school.
if it's like one where you, like our school psychologist will do rating scales, taking care of them side by side.
Just
All
not
of
in
my schools. Because that's even student that doesn't have it all at home,
Yeah.
but he touches the storm at school.
okay, let's come
Definitely
together.
support. Yeah.
So we just heard, what one, so I heard, I was listening, I heard you guys ask about permissions. I've had 2 districts tell me that you can run this, not, because it's not a standardized assessment, it's a protocol or profile. Without, getting permission to test, I would still talk to your director just to make sure.
So the other
go
thing
ahead.
I was saying, because we really want family input when we're doing this, because our kids are so different at home, that, I would prefer doing it as part of a team meeting, or even over the telephone or something like that, so that the family input is there, which if the family's doing it with you, they're doing it with you, so, but yes, it's not standardized, it's really, something to give us ideas for, where to go from, but you notice there's no months, or there's no ages or anything else like that on it, so.
Yeah, and another thing you were talking about, how often to run it, I heard, and so, Caroline, can you tell them what you said, and then I have something
So
else to.
typically, I would redo this each year, for most of my kids. If I have a kid that's just doing leaps and bounds, I might do it every 6 months. But really, I'm updating, if I'm getting objectives from here, I'm updating those objectives every 3 months anyway. So I'm doing my progress monitoring that way. But I would for, like a yearly update, type of thing. And a lot of times that's just to show parents, look, these colors changed, that Joey made these gains. Because again, a lot of my parents at those PPTs, it's just hard and frustrating for them because they may feel like Joey's now making gains. So.
And I have used it too, when we've started an AAC trial. That's been very helpful. So I've done this as a baseline, and this would be
That's
the
really
student's
good, yeah.
baseline. We did this before any voice output AAC intervention. Then even in 6 weeks, you can run it again, and oftentimes those colors fill in pretty quick. And I expect this student for those colors to fill in pretty quick with the use of a high-tech voice output device.
And that's a great point, and talk
Yeah.
about data to support, you know, if you're doing a trial, but to
Yeah.
support purchasing, having that pre and post is with videotapes.
Yes.
I mean, not videotapes, obviously, but with videos, because it's like the seeing is believing, type of thing.
Just pictured
so.
you with the VHS.
Yeah,
I was in an 8th grade class and they knew what a record player was. They
Oh,
did
really?
not,
Wow.
well, because records they're like retro and kinda
Oh, yeah,
like
that's
hip
true.
again.
Yeah, retro,
But they
yeah,
not,
records are
many
that.
of them did not know what a VHS tape was. Yeah. They knew a CD, they knew CDs, but not, okay. So any questions about the matrix? Oh no, so we didn't go back to C8. So what would you do? So, and I know this one wasn't super robust, but given those 2 pieces of information, what would you do to help teach this kid how to use AAC to request attention appropriately? What would you do?
Find something they want.
What'd you say?
Find something that they want. Like
So-
if just, like if it's social attention, but like if they want, like, getting your attention to ask for something.
Yep, so they have to get you before, so it's a social attention piece, but then they could get you to do something. So you're saying find something motivating and don't give it to them until they get you.
Like a lot of my kids will, I'm only motivating because I have the thing that they want.
But at least you're having, so you would have them ask for you, and then you'd come over and then ask them what they want. You could do that, what else?
So like I'm just starting text with one of my students,
Mm-hmm.
and I trialed it in my office where he's requesting for a food item,
Mm-hmm.
and he knows that like if I'm not looking, he'll open my hand and put it in, but then when I go to the classroom, he always brings the picture to me, and I'm like, I don't have the box, so he's gotta go find the person with the box, so it's like, okay, so how do you get their attention and like know where to go, I feel like.
Right, so that's where you would be modeling a request for that person, so whoever has the box, right, that's when so you wouldn't be having him request the box, you'd be having him request the person. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Something else, I mean, do your kids have a favorite person, would you say? Do most of your students, or the majority of them, have someone pretty favored? For sure.
Right, being able to get that person for most of our kids is more powerful than anything else.
Yeah.
You know, so, right, so again, in teaching them the quickest way to get that person is an appropriate way, because if a kid screams, so if Nick's kid was screaming, I don't know what you want.
Right.
But if you use a message, you know, Nicole, come here, you know I'm gonna run and be excited to, you know, go to that student. So we have to think too, it's serving that purpose, but when we look at the appropriate versus a more conventional, we wanna make sure the more conventional is easy to use, faster, and more efficient than the screaming, or whatever that child is using. And getting someone specific to come run to you is a lot more efficient than laying on the ground screaming.
Right. And so what we've done, you know, it says create opportunities for your student to request attention by withholding it. Well, I mean, sometimes that person would have to come in, right, and give them some attention, right, so they know they're there, right? For my one kid, the janitor was, like I said, was his, so we arranged it, so the janitor came in, he started talking to him, and then he went over here and talked to another person.
Right.
And whoo, was he mad at first, but we taught him, I need you, come here, and we actually didn't even, at first, do the person's name. And why didn't we do that? The janitor's name. Why didn't we say Mr. So-and-so? Why didn't we call him?
Because it's gonna be harder to generalize.
Yeah, we wanna teach him the
Yeah.
core, so you can say,
Right.
I need you across any context,
Right, and people will come.
and people, right, and so of course we had him come at first, you know, because that was the most motivating, and then eventually we said, I need you, Mr. blah, 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 we added that on, we would require that, but when we initially taught it, it wasn't even that person's particular name, it was just, I need you. Now remember, level 7, we didn't really go over the levels, again, we could spend 2 days on the communication matrix, is combining language together. So that's why the first one says make sure that they are gaining your attention and using a symbol combination to communicate. So, any other thoughts on that one?
Right, I mean, this is a pretty sophisticated communicator
Yeah.
already for
Yes.
a lot of things that this student is doing,
Right.
so, yeah.
But what we wanted to make sure you guys knew is that of course you want your students to be using this part, but anything from social on to the right,
Mhm.
there's some relatively functional ways you can be teaching that, sabotaging, setting it up, and you can be writing your goals and objectives based on
Yeah.
that. So your big goal could be become a competent communicator if you
Mhm.
want, and then you could be putting in
Right.
objectives that are social and information in
So
nature.
objectives based on the function.
Yeah.
So I read a lot of IEPs, and a lot of the objectives are identifying and requesting.
Yeah.
So but if we look here, I mean, we have opportunities here for objectives in 4 different areas that we know are critical areas for communication. So I would rather see those be the basis for the types of objectives that we write versus identifying.
Yeah.
Because truthfully, we don't need to be able to identify many things to get those things. You know, I went to Germany, I had all the things I liked. Most of them were food and clothes and a few other things, because I recognized the item, but I did not know the German word. So our kids can and I get this a lot when I'm talking to some BCBAs where they want a lot of discrete trial done with will find, will identify. And that's not a really heavy duty skill for our students to be able to demonstrate a lot of communication functions.
So, and I know we brought up BCBAs, and I hope we're not sounding negative either, because where I've really been able to partner with them
Yes.
is looking at this matrix,
Yeah.
looking at these suggestions, and showing them this is our goal for communication. You know, we want to be able to get all the way down to the bottom here with this student. Here are some suggestions. So what we just talked about in terms of we want this student to request attention. They can look at that and we can look at it together and they can help you create a program that everybody can run that's functional. I've done some really nice things when you partner with the BCBA to show here's the matrix, here's what we want to do, how can you help us get there? And they can oftentimes write a pretty detailed and functional program based on that functional communication, but not some of those skills Carol Ann was talking about, like the seek and find. Any questions about that? And that's huge. I know I'm in some of your districts. I know it can be a challenge, but that's, you know, because we sometimes come from different ends of this communication spectrum sometimes. But if you guys can partner together, look at that matrix in those last 2, it gives you some pretty functional ways to achieve those goals and objectives.
And that's and it gets back to the teaming and partnering together. Because if we think of some of our other disciplines and their exposure to communication, it may be on tests that are tests or, you know, references that are very different than the perspective, say, a speech path is coming from. So this is really a nice tool to look at, like the breadth of communication strategies, but again, those 4 critical areas.
All right. Last but not least, so we've shown you the matrix, which is a really helpful tool for a number of reasons. But we also looked at the three additional really awesome main resources for teaching AAC, not just requesting. So what we're going to do is split each table up, or split your tables up into groups, and it's great. We have 3 tables, and we'll have the live stream people do one too. We're going to assign a resource to all of you, to each table, to explore. And then you'll see there's this Google Doc here that you can all click on. I hope I did the sharing settings right.
They were
Is it working?
So last night,
Yeah, so.
I was
Done.
pretty sure it was okay.
Okay, I thought so too. I checked it before. Oh, good. I see a few. Someone is an anonymous jumbo octopus. I'm sorry, whoever got chosen as the. I saw that before. Yeah, a jumbo octopus was on the other one. I've never seen anything like it. So what we're going to have you do is explore your resource, and I don't know why this is doing this. Why this is shaded here.
So it was, the border popped up for read and write.
Yeah, I saw that.
Click on read and write and make sure it's for, I don't know, it's not I thought maybe it was
the masking. Yeah.
the mask tool, but some other extension is now on.
Okay. Well, maybe I'll just get off of it and try it again. So what we're gonna have you do is on this Google Doc, we're gonna have you explore the resource we assign you. There's 3 of them. And on the Google Doc itself, we just want you to give a brief summary of the program, some of the key components. You can, we don't need what they include, I don't think, because that's pretty much the key components. The pros and cons, and if you would suggest it. This way, what we're hoping is you create a resource that you'll always have, that you can go back to share with teams, to see what are the pros and cons of each program. We're gonna share out at the end, so we're gonna give you guys about 15 minutes to look at the one that we assign you, and then we will share out very briefly at the end. Does that make sense? And that way you're not sitting here listening to us talk. Carol Ann and I, each one has its pros and cons, and some of them are bigger than the others. So I think MasterPal is probably the most the biggest one for the most part. So I'll have the live streaming people do MasterPal.
Power AAC is
Pretty big. Okay. So let's have the live streaming people do MasterPal, and this back left do MasterPal as well. And so just briefly, incidentally, we'll give you just a brief rundown. MasterPal was created by Tabby, who did that core vocabulary that we looked at before. Oh, hopefully the website isn't having a problem. She has created a bunch of modules for an incredible amount, and ooh, you're right. Oh no, there it goes. It came up. So it's this MasterPal AAC training series. It is incredibly extensive. So just gloss through it. There is the beginning intro about what MasterPal is, and talk about the pros and cons. So that's this live stream in the back left. And I'll go to make sure you want to just go to this link here under MasterPal AAC training series. Oh, you know what? Let me change that link. I'm sorry, guys. That one is just kind of a lessons learned one. Let me change it. All right, refresh your document, because that will give you all the modules. If you refresh your document, it should take you to the right one. So back right. Why don't you guys? Which one do you think they should have, Carol Ann? Because there's more of them.
So I would go to the Power AAC. So we just want you to look at the number 9. I mean, you can look at anyone if you want, but that's another one where there's so much in there that really it's like a whole AAC specialized course. So number 9.
Nicole, it's still saying 7.
Hang on, I'll come to you guys in a second. Let me come to you guys. And then you guys over here, the impact. Okay? That's definitely not as extensive as the other two.
Impact,
again, pros and cons.
Article, it's not, but it describes the program.
So what did
It's still saying
Oops.
lessons learned,
Okay, hang on.
even though I refreshed. Let me see. I mean, it's got all the modules.
I want you to
under
have
it,
the modules,
but they're all under it.
Okay.
So you just should go through every module separately.
So what I would do is, let me find it.
Basically like our goals.
Yeah, no, so you should go to building limited learning AAC.
I have like things that has one objective.
This is facilitator 1. Let me just make sure it gets you. I wanted you to give you the one that has all of them.
It's very frustrating.
Is it not going?
It's still loading. I don't know if it's because all of us are on it,
Yeah, but it's not like
It's taking forever to load too.
This
It's
is,
whole
I mean, the
phone
link comes
that
up now and it
is
says
minus
lessons
one
learned,
home.
but then if you scroll
So
down, it
my
says number
coworker,
11,
her
and
theory
then you
is
keep going
that
to
was the
10,
whole
9,
net
7, and
neutrality.
then
The next
you have to go to the
That
next
she
page.
said she's noticed
Okay.
that
Read each one
things
of
are
those
slower to
things
get to
exactly, so
websites
that
and
what it was
things
supposed
like
to be, or
that.
something.
Yeah, so why don't you guys just look
Yeah, they're
at
having a hard time
module
making
one,
sense.
which is a description?
Is that a
So there was,
website
yes, that, companies cannot favor other websites that when we
And
do
you can
search and
see
things like that.
What,
net
it's an
neutrality means that
overview,
all
basically, so
websites
it's
are
gonna
equal.
overview what the components of
And
them
that
all are.
was, so that was an Obama law.
So look at that one and look
taken
at what
off the books
the
with
downloads
this
are, that, in,
administration.
in terms
And
of the modules,
because
so,
for big companies,
and then
they
talk
don't
about the
want
pros
it.
and cons, what's available, et cetera, and you'll see, once you're ready, after you see the
So you
description,
continue
there's
on.
trainer guidelines, and then a whole facilitator guide here on the bottom. So check out all that just for module one, and then know each module is literally all that for each module. So this is just a module
Is she on the
that's
right thing?
describing just
Google
that
it though, and something
Oh, wait,
comes
wait,
up.
got it,
and then
So
module
you
two,
guys got it.
that was probably like good communication support or whatever. So just look at one for right now, okay?
So the patent one for, table Manchester, did any of you get on it at all? Because from that link, mine literally just hopped to it.
Yeah.
Right,
yeah,
the last,
resources,
on the resources, the AAC questionnaire, it said I could send it across access.
Alright, so when Carol Ann made,
So,
oh, did you?
sorry. So none of you got to.
No, she's gotta,
You got there?
she's gotta change her permissions, it's Carol Ann.
So I'm on employee
That's like the
Wi-Fi,
new
so
groups, I forgot the
could be that
attachment.
too.
Yeah.
Mine
Is
is
it
that
a-
Gmail tells you, like, you said see attached, and you just attach it.
Yeah.
And I'm like,
Thank you.
So this one, again, it has 12 modules, so it's
You don't have
pretty
an, you don't have an
extensive.
attachment because you have a Google.
But you can see it's
Drive.
almost really like a self-paced course in AAC. The core vocabulary with the core, Project Core website is a similar, thing where it's a self-paced, course. And using core vocab, it has a lot on literacy also. So similar type of thing. So we had talked about use of AAC in the classroom.
For slides.
So,
That's at the end.
but it's pretty extensive.
It's at the facilitator guide and it's a Google slide handout. So your question that tells you each slide that she uses.
Oh, thank you.
Related.
Okay. Well, I said it as copy though, was they able to?
You still have to, do
Change
something
it,
with the
yeah.
settings, yeah. For module. And is it too much? What, just looking at the slide, you mean? Or the whole thing?
So this introduction is just,
Oh, the framework guidelines.
it just actually is talking about AAC, it's not talking about this program specifically. Number one.
Is this tabby?
Yeah, he's just trying to figure out structure, I don't think that these slides are really.
So the slides are to actually be a present the stuff.
Right, so it's.
But I mean, when you look at it,
Mm-hmm.
it should give you a guidance of what all of that, this whole module's about, right? But
So-
it doesn't really,
So this
it's actually just showing
these are just the
AAC,
slides,
right?
These are just the slides, so, there's a slide deck, which is in Google Drive, right? Yeah, did you do this one? Yeah, so this is the actual slides that you present.
So it's kind of trainer.
It's a trainer, right, that's exactly what it is.
Everything to.
But as soon as I go through it.
Click one, let's see if there's any, yeah, there's no, yeah. So these are her slides.
Kind of explain AAC.
Yeah,
Yeah, so when you click it, the video, so this is the slide
yeah.
that you would use to explain the Master Pal program.
Oh, well, I have.
So it's just an introduction to AAC, but if you go.
Can we edit that without you
Yeah,
giving us
I
permission,
have
or?
that, and I was
Yeah.
like, that looks like a lot
Nicole,
easier to read.
Click on the
so
one that
like
says slide
visual.
deck.
Yeah,
so
that was
many
just on it.
ways to figure it out.
So if you go to the
So-
facilitator guide, that's what has the actual Google slides.
So choice
up
sports
there,
would
and so
still
this
have
just talks
court
about the
and
topics
print.
addressed. So this
So
is,
that would be
like the
almost like,
talking points.
so that would be kinda like the print
Go with the
now.
slide.
With like a sentence,
Here,
like if there's like a choice.
sorry,
word,
I don't know why
space
you're
station,
editing
it'd be like
But it
I,
is
or
a-
as like a sentence.
It's a way to
So-
string.
I wouldn't use
Master
a
Pal.
sentence strip, I would use like
So,
core,
but if we're
and
gonna
then
be talking
maybe
just about master
hear
policy,
that
so
with,
tell us about master
a few
policy.
things.
So this is, well, this is the first part, which is all about becoming.
So do we,
a-
so do we need to go to the second thing for us to really write?
To write the next, let's see what the next thing is.
So we'd have to go to module 2 at least, right?
So,
So it
Well,
is
let's
a
see.
yeah,
So module
here
1
for
is
it.
about facilitation skills.
so you know how
So
the
let's see what
tabby one
module
has
2
that
is.
plastic where I can change the,
We have to go here and
that
then
kinda gives you a lot of flexibility if you kind
you
of
scroll
do
down,
that.
and then you article 2 is down there.
Can I ask a question? I'm sorry. Can anybody else edit the document?
It's view only.
It's view only.
So share settings, we fall down on everything.
I'll be right there, Sue.
That's
Thanks.
okay, I'm just trying to get back out to where we're at, module 2, right?
Oh, you're doing it right now?
Yeah. There we go, view.
Alright.
Thank you, oh, look, it says, oh, can view, that's it. Alright, refresh, it should.
Thank you. Module 2.
Did you find module 2? So then what's module 2 about? Being a model.
So, do you want us just to break out, module 1 explain?
No, I would just explain what Master Pal is. So if you go back, yeah, and what the point of Master Pal is. So if you go back to module 1, yeah. Read her description of what Master Pal is. So this is module 1, but this should give you an actual description of.
There's a real need for ongoing support for
I got one of
communication
those
partners.
Anonymous
So it's really a training to train your
And
So
nobody
has
else.
he wants you to kind of describe that.
What a new animal.
Here's what the tools are that she gives you, and then what are the pros and cons to Master Pal, but there's like 11 or 12 modules, there's no way you can go through all of them, but if you looked at module 1, that's what module 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 look like.
Master Pal is innovate,
I'm not even like
acceptable
done with
training
the
modalities,
right.
statements more
Is,
than questions, time, grade time, and time
Key
for code.
components.
So,
Engage in
Master
activities.
Pal
That comes in here.
would you have
Yeah.
an overview of what it is?
Just an overview of Master Pal.
Appropriate prompting and left child lead.
Yeah.
So that's the whole idea behind it.
like the years
So
to
should that be the summary?
That could be basically
That would be the
something.
summary, just saying that you're
Can you read it for me?
teaching.
From here.
Look there.
Model, and it's this, and then facilitator's guide.
Wait, we can't.
To
You
train,
can cut
yeah,
and
you
paste
refresh it, I changed it, sorry about that.
You can cut and paste right out of the thing.
Right.
The training module topics included, and it's got the whole steps. 1 through 11, you can cut and paste and put it right in.
Well, I can't remember where you are.
You want, I got it. You got it?
About modeling before.
Yeah, so this is not, I want a notepad and paper.
yeah.
Like my grandma and I like I didn't say that she figured out how to use it.
I have different, like,
I have to tell you, my husband
broke it
is
down
got
into
a computer.
different components, thinking like,
He's upstairs in his office.
I should have not taken Benadryl
Did
at lunch.
you hear though that like the pollen capture was 5,000? It's supposed to 1,500 is high.
Said enter for the long.
5,000.
Sorry,
Yeah.
So you're not more than me, I was.
So like, conference, so you know how to do it, have the options, and I'm listening, but you have to hit enter in the system.
They have the option to then
Why
why
does
doesn't
it
it
return?
return?
And I said,
And
I don't know why it doesn't return. But then just remember to enter means return and you're all set.
Which one did you guys have? The power?
Yeah, remember, just a description of what it is, what the pros and cons are, what what types of materials they're giving you.
You know, I can't do this, and then I do it, and it just goes, yeah, I don't know why you can do that.
When I switched from being a Windows
So you can try it that time?
delete
Yeah.
is backspace.
Yeah.
And there is no delete button on that.
Now there is now.
No.
Right,
No.
and that's like optional.
Okay,
There's
now,
now
but that's the
free.
backspace button. You can't delete using the delete button. Delete means that things aren't.
Oh, this is fine. Well, I appreciate it.
No, what?
Yeah.
You ready?
Oh, no.
That's mine. Do you need one? Or I want
No.
Ready? Back.
Like a special
Search here, and I hit delete. It does.
I don't want that to happen.
Sometimes you are typing in the middle of something and you're like, oh, I don't need this word anymore.
I have to have
You
like
can
a
saw those, and so I read.
There were 5 of them. Yeah, but I was super nervous
I'm
about
holding
it.
them up,
So
putting them in a
there is no-
Ziploc bag, forgetting I was just putting it down. But I was like,
That if you have.
oh, I was so happy, I'm like, someone's gonna think I'm totally.
Holding them like I've never done that.
Stealing
I'm
them.
not worried
We
about
don't have those at school.
Right, right.
So I was like,
that's
oh my
so
gosh,
funny.
this is perfect for him. And I was like, what do you mean? So they're gonna crack up, cause I'm gonna have a whole little Ziploc bag for him with them on it.
Right.
It's a lot easier to do this.
Yeah, like 2 months ago, whatever.
That's why it's like a part of
Well,
it.
and just take out
So have you not used it?
Yeah, I'm just gonna type
That's
right out.
the splash pad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna cut them right off and just say like, good job.
Yeah.
So you have to like this thing and
Right.
Well, we use it every year.
Not for anything? Wow. I know some kids, certain things will only do it. Yeah, that's not gonna
And
fly.
so we're like, and then I was like, we had a picture of guy was buying a picture, so that the guy can sign it.
Of course.
Or maybe we can get him, I mean, if I have to, I'll order some of those for him to have, you know what I mean, I'll do like a package of them, see if he'll even use it. Do that one. And then I'll do inspections, remember, the time when somebody does it, it's just like, you know, I find out his,
Right.
and I'm sending trade during sessions, I'm sending, notes to everybody that can help me, anyone. Yeah,
Oh my gosh.
Then I mean, to get them to go on the trip, so.
Yeah, they use sessions as a break.
There's no breaks out.
Yes.
No, she did not.
Let's go and.
As a mom, yes.
Alright, how you guys doing? You all ready?
I know for like especially
this one.
Oh, yeah.
which is
That's
really
nice, yeah.
nice. And then it goes breaks it down like that.
Yeah.
And then it breaks it down into like, I didn't even think about all of these.
11 model.
It took her, she's my friend, it took her a good part of a year.
Only a year?
Do it on and off, well, like, as, not just part of her work, like, it was like a fun business.
Still, like, the fact that she did it in that big
Yeah.
piece.
Well, she's,
Look at this.
she does
This is how we
that
work
on
on
her
my
website, I mean, she's also
Well, no, she
doing-
doesn't do the practical AAC, she contributes to it,
She's
she
in
contributes
it.
that way.
She's, I mean, there's so much
My
stuff
friend
there.
Erica.
She's amazing.
She's
Right.
done it never.
Really important.
Plus she's
Five
kind of
more
right, like, do you wanna do this
weeks
now, or like, I never asked them. I've never.
Right.
I
Well,
didn't
the thing I
mention
like
this
about
all, yeah.
Master
Usually
Cal
they first
especially
work then,
is that
whatever it is that they
gives
want
you
to do.
materials, and you have to look at it, of course,
But
like
I
what your
can ask
modules
them.
to help you train facilitators, and that's, cause that's
I
what we're
can
talking
see
about,
one of my
you're there
friends
2.5
working
hours a week,
and just
how can
like
you work
on
with
this
staff
layout.
to get them to just
do
I
things
never
that
thought
I,
about those words.
this is like all about good communication strategies.
Here's where
And
I'm
this
Yeah,
part,
so the only part I find confusing is that they keep on talking about like a choice board and a scoreboard, and I never think of those as two separate. But I guess if you think about just a flip book, they kind of.
How did we get that?
We have new parents that are teachers for that, right? We have several.
so like I've always
Yeah,
wondered
but
why
it's-
like
they're just
under
That's
break
right.
area,
That's
and there's
right.
literally just a hard piece of paper with your 3x3s, everything in there. That's why
And I always went for it, so.
So this is what I didn't understand, so what are, so for making a choice, it's to add more words.
Yes, exactly, where I live.
Okay, so
Did you hear the article that happened yesterday?
That's all
Right,
they say.
like think about, like if I have like tiny marshmallows and then there's like about, or if I'm talking, it's like, oh, they're large marshmallows, I like large marshmallows, so soft, they're white, you know, all those, so it could also be my dream about describing.
Just sit, yeah, in your
And when I start asking them, and it's like, you know, oh, you want a marshmallow? And I can hold on, whole thing.
Another pro is
You
that
know, I want
has,
ours too, now that you are, so.
specifically targets five different communications.
Oh, yeah, no, and my sister's first grade teacher used to have mini march. That was her nineties, said she would walk around the class, they'd be in her apron, and she'd just walk around and give them kids. Nineties when she did that.
Should I have that someplace in here? It's a pain, but I get it. Right, we have a pain.
So any comments about that?
So it's a lot, I think that's a good.
All right, one more minute, then we're gonna share out briefly.
As linear, okay, so put that in.
It starts out pretty, and then it kind of like, well,
It jumps around.
yeah,
Like if there was a structure to it,
Okay.
like I started saying, okay, they talk about the purpose, they have the
Yeah.
examples, they give a rationale, and then they give steps,
and then there's extra.
and then there's a whole bunch of other stuff that goes off in different directions.
Okay.
So I know it's hard.
Okay.
I mean, I think.
Yeah. Right. It's a huge, there's a lot of, think about it, that's just one, right,
That's one module.
Yeah.
right, right.
But I think if we can find some very specific things within that, you know, I think that knowing why you're doing what you're doing is always helpful. It doesn't
Oh,
that
shoot.
out, but it looks like you have to kind of find those things. Teaches something that's in my time is that, everything that is organized.
No, I just said there's a lot of information that's scattered.
Yeah, so perhaps not like linear, I'm a linear person, so when it's a little here and there, I kinda lose myself.
Well, like you said, if you have time, you can pull it out and then reorganize it yourself, but
Or pull out to especially verbal prompting.
when you suggest this research.
And short response, but it looks like we put information in there.
Somebody spent a huge amount of time, and it's so, if you look at, Master How to, that was Abby.
Oh, that was her.
But I know, she spent a huge amount of time, this Nick knows her, so we had access to it before she published it.
Research for pediatrics.
Of, time that devoted to it, really, just because we all have the same thing, we want our AAC kids to be.
So I guess it's a manageable amount of information, right, to implement.
So, yeah.
I mean, it looks, I mean, the chart.
We made a lot of progress with that though.
All of those are done, chart presentation, pretty manageable.
Get some pushback from some parents, but it's at least, it's almost.
Maybe they drop it 5 times, then
So
it's
I
crazy
just-
case.
Okay.
I just did 2 evaluations.
All right, I see you Power AAC people are just finishing up, but we're gonna get started. So Master Pal people, can you give the group a summary of the program that you saw?
Okay, so, the summary is just like the acronym for MasterPal: motivate, accept multiple modalities, statements more than questions, time, wait time, and time for growth, engage naturally, response not required, presume potential, appropriate prompting, let the child lead, and basically it's just providing a framework, for supporting the communication partners. There's 11 different modules, which we, although appreciate the time put into that, it is extensive to go through.
Right. It's a little overwhelming. MasterPal in general is to train communication partners. So it gives you as a speech therapist or a special educator all the tools, including handouts, facilitator guides, notes, PowerPoints, to train your staff. However, there's 11 different modules.
Yeah, so it's everything you could need, which is amazing, but it's a lot to go through.
Especially in 10 minutes that we gave you. Yeah.
So one of the pros that Jen put was that it's a simple poster that can be displayed in the classroom.
Mm-hmm.
And I personally really like that. I do think that just the MasterPal itself, without even looking at anything else that goes into it, all of those things are really important strategies that just using those without even delving further into it, that's really important. I feel like a lot of the times some parents or teachers or myself are asking 1,000 questions.
Yeah.
And it's it shouldn't always be that. They shouldn't always feel like they're obligated to respond, and sometimes it's okay not to respond. And response doesn't always need to be verbal. It can be a head nod or something like that.
Right.
And having it be the acronym is really, like the poster and the acronym being there is really helpful. Because if you teach someone basically, is that what you're gonna say? That you could put that on the wall and then it reminds people or give it to them on a little card reminding them.
It reminds me of that AAC do's and don'ts.
Yeah, the boot camp.
That you can look at.
So that's the AAC boot camp poster, which I am trying to get to the site, and the internet is not responding. But we will post a link. I love that poster.
Yeah.
Like it's just a good visual reference that.
Absolutely. So this is the poster they're kind of talking about. She gives it to you. You can put it on the wall. And now she just left for a second. But I know we were talking about, the challenges with paraeducators, and this is a great tool to teach them how to be good communicators, and especially good communicators for kids who have AAC needs. I think each module is broken down. I don't know what she said, but it's only supposed to be about a 20-minute to 30-minute max presentation. So if you guys are doing PLCs or anything like that, or have collaboration time, you could pull these out and have all the information there to do some training and communication training with your staff.
And I know too, like I was recently in a PPT where I have an advocate asking me, well, what kind of training have the paras gone through? Whereas this would be nice to like reference and say,
Absolutely.
I'm using this program and it has this research behind it.
Yeah. And she gives you everything, and you can modify it. So she gives you the Google slide deck. You can modify it to your needs. You could copy and paste her notes right underneath that, and it's all done for you, and then you can just modify it. So it's a beautiful thing, and it's supposed to be quick little snippets. That's why she broke it out into all these modules, knowing that there's no way she could even get people for just 2 days to be good AAC facilitators. So it's broken out, so you could pick and choose which module you want to look at. If you guys are really good with wait time, you don't have to do that one. So pros, it sounds like there's a lot of information, but cons, unfortunately, it's a lot of information too, right? Killian, does anybody say anything on the chat about it? And let's see, it's extensive and you would recommend it. Okay, so next team, impact. What did you think about the impact program?
Well, when we read that, the only thing we're not clear on the impact program is if we didn't see the program, we just saw that article about the program, and so we're not clear what the program includes.
Go ahead.
So it's an instructional communication or a communication partner instructional program. It looks like that it's research-based. That was good for how to teach communication partners the best methods for working with students with AAC. It was research, looks like it was based in pediatrics only, so that could be a plus or a con. And I like that it did video review, because I've used videos with the Hannon program like way back when in the day, and I think and like I was videoed in grad school, and I don't know if all you guys were too, but it's such a powerful learning tool.
Yes.
I wish people could video me now, and then I could just look at it later and say, why did I do that? So I think we liked that. And we like that it taught a variety of skills. It talked about aided communication, expectant delay, questioning, verbal prompting, and contingent response. But we weren't sure, or I wasn't sure, or did you find it? We never found like what it actually included.
So the
like you
program
talked about.
itself, it's only talking about what they did for the impact program for their research.
Right.
So there is no tool.
Right, so there's no
So you have to
PowerPoint or
right.
videos, it's more, rather than program, it should be more procedure.
Right.
Okay,
Type
so
of
I
that,
guess that was
yes.
a con.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's a
Kind of.
definite con, yeah.
Because you're left, it sounds great,
Yeah.
but then you're left with like, okay, how do I,
Right.
You'd
how
have
do
to
I do this?
Right, you'd have to fill in the framework itself. So it gives you a framework, but you'd have to make your own video modeling or find something that's video modeling that's appropriate,
Yep.
blah, blah, blah.
So I guess for cons, I'll put no modules /
Actual materials, you would need to create them and fill it in. It's
materials.
giving you the research-based way
Yeah.
to train facilitators,
Yeah.
but it doesn't have any of the trainings.
And the pros we said is research-based, the chart presentation was clear.
Yeah.
And it was a manageable presentation of information, but then no materials.
Yep.
We kept looking to see if
If there's more and more,
Okay,
yeah.
where is
Yeah.
it?
All right, and last but not least, Power AAC. Give us your elevator speech. What did you think of Power AAC?
It's information about the purposes of communication and steps on how to implement them with activities. There's a lot of information.
Yeah.
And it had really good visuals.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of information and
Yeah.
it was kind of scattered, so you
Yeah.
kind of have to like pull out what you want.
Yeah.
So, but it was good.
It's got a lot of good modules in there, but I agree. I think even though Tabby's isn't on the Master Pal, there's like not one place you could just see it all. You have to go to each of the blog posts. It's a little bit more broken down, and it gives you all the tools right there, where that one's a little all over the place. But I think a combination of both of them could give you some really good training ideas. And I know Amanda, right? Is it Amanda? You were talking about the paras you work with and how sometimes it could be a challenge. You know, this could be to use these modules could be a great way to do some training with them, to be good communication partners, and
I
kind of
think
blame
they
it
have
on
some
them.
really good visuals in them too.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's for, I was thinking mostly for paras and how to.
Yep. So the last page of the PowerPoint, we just put in the AAC bootcamp poster, well, the link to the bootcamp poster. And if you haven't seen it, I really like it. It's like 10 do's and 10 don'ts. Like one of the don'ts is don't leave the device on a shelf. Don't always ask yes, no questions, things like that.
Yeah.
So it's a nice thing to print out and just kind of post around the room as kind of a visual reminder to people in the room. Like we don't think about it, but I can't tell you how many times you'll go in and the vocal output device will be on the shelf, and it's like, well, why doesn't he have it? Oh, he doesn't need it now. And it's like,
Not needed, he still doesn't talk.
right, but, or he doesn't, right, and it's like, but the other kids have their mouths, you know, so it's just a nice visual. So the last part of our plan was to give everybody an action plan. So we did a forum. Make a copy. And the forum is just to help you all in developing an action plan as, you know, as a team. So if you have team members here, but take it with you. So it kind of, we hope, helps step you out for, you know, here's a key objective, and then strategies, actions I can do. What can I use to help? What barriers can I anticipate? Unintended consequences might be the result of implementing these strategies. What stakeholders must be involved. It's like unintended consequences. Sometimes in some environments, they may not want the student to communicate a lot more, like, you know, if I gave you a choice and we were talking about the word never, and I said, I never want to do that, and you have to respect my communication, it's like, well, you asked, you know, as my mother said to my father, if you don't wanna know, Ern, don't ask. So there can be some unintended consequences, for kids being able to communicate better. And then the stakeholders, so, you know, we talked earlier about the BCBA, I am not down on BCBA's.
Right.
But that's certainly a stakeholder in some environments that you wanna buy them in early, because I do see a lot of programs, if the BCBA doesn't buy into it, it can make life pretty difficult. So I think looking at the activity, the matrix and things like that, and getting them to buy in early, can be wonderful, so.
So we know there's no magic wand, and we wish there was, but hopefully we've given you guys some functional strategies for working with your staff, working with the people who are with your kids all day long. You know, it does also take a little bit of a paradigm shift from that 2.5 hours in your office to how can I train and work with the staff that communicate with the student all day in order to move your kids forward. And otherwise, it's really hard to move beyond requesting, because that's kind of all you can really do in that amount of time. And Carolyn and I have been in your shoes. We've been speech therapists in the schools, and we know it's not easy.
I still am.
Yeah, exactly. But hopefully some of these materials that we've given you, especially towards the end there, give you some pre-made things that you could, you know, take and use with your staff to help your students become more confident communicators.
So I do want to give you one strategy that I've used with my paras that has worked really well. In that I would take 5-minute brainstorming activities, and I asked the teacher, all I want is 5 minutes. I don't care if it's during snack or whatever. And we'd do a brainstorm. So we would take 2 minutes, we'd pick an activity during the day. They would spend 2 minutes on all the ways the kids could communicate different things, like all the different things they could communicate. So I never talked about what they want, just all the different things. And then they would take 1 minute narrowing that down to maybe a couple of things, and then they would take 2 minutes doing an action plan of how they could do that. So and I took all their ideas. At the end of the year, this was pre-Google, they had a document of like 30 pages of ideas for things kids could communicate either for or activities or blah, blah, blah. But 30 pages of ideas that they had generated that all put in a notebook. And the difference between my staff, like literally before I'd be like, oh, Carol Ann's here, get the chalkers out. So like one time I caught a para running back in the building, and I'm like, what's the problem? She's like, oh my gosh, I can't believe it. I forgot so-and-so's talker. And it's like she's running back in to get it. I did give prizes. So it was the most responses, they got prizes. It was always something edible. But it was really doing that for a couple of years. It was like night and day. I mean, it really was. And I gave them onus to all the ideas. None of the ideas in that book were me. So think about things like that, and you know, edible prizes always work. But the paras, the people that are with those kids the most, and once their ideas started flowing, like it didn't stop after that 5 minutes. So.
Thank you all.
Thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good one.
Have a great rest of the school year. I think
I
29
can't
more
believe
days
it.
in the district I was in this morning.
5 more Mondays.
Thank you all. If there's any questions,
Bye,
just
Roger.
let us know.
Did you work summer? I was wondering about
No, I don't work summer.
this year.
I was in Minnesota.